The bunker's alarms blare as Patrick Turner, a 35-year-old retired human soldier, stumbles upon 5 young Everin girls abandoned by their own people. His discovery shatters the eerie silence of the desolate alien colony world, torn apart by the recent interstellar war between humanity and the Evora. Patrick's breath catches in his throat as he takes in the sight before him. The girls, ranging from 6 to 14 years old, huddled together in a corner of the hidden bunker. Their large luminescent eyes, a hallmark of their species, shine with fear and desperation. The oldest girl, Aurora, steps forward, her slender frame trembling. "They left us behind," she whispers, her voice barely audible over the bunker's failing life support systems. "We were too weak, too sickly, not worth saving." Patrick's hand instinctively moves to his weapon, years of combat against the Evora ingrained in his muscles. But as he looks at the malnourished children, their skin pale and papery, he feels a surge of compassion overriding his lingering prejudice. Time is running out. The bunker's systems are failing, leaving only 72 hours before the girls suffocate. Patrick knows he's violating direct orders from Earth's military command to eliminate any remaining Everin presence. Yet he can't bring himself to abandon these helpless children. He reaches for his military med kit, administering emergency first aid to the weakest among them. The youngest girl, barely 6 years old, whimpers as he injects her with a cocktail of nutrients and antibiotics. Patrick's mind races, formulating a plan to get them off planet before it's too late. Desperate, he attempts to contact his former squad. The response is swift and harsh. "You're committing treason, Turner," his old commander barks through the static-filled communication. "Leave those alien scum to rot." Undeterred, Patrick reaches out to a human smuggler he encountered during the war. The price for transport is steep, but it's their only hope. As he waits for extraction, new dangers emerge. Human scavengers, drawn by the bunker's faint life signs, close in, hungry for valuable Everin technology. Patrick barricades the entrance. Knowing he can't hold them off forever, the girl's health deteriorates rapidly as oxygen levels plummet. He realizes with growing dread that he'll need to make multiple trips across hostile terrain to carry them to the extraction point one by one. As he prepares for the first treacherous journey, Patrick cradles the youngest, most critically ill Everin child in his arms. Her fragile body feels impossibly light, her breath shallow and labored. He looks down at her alien features, so different from his own, yet unmistakably those of an innocent child. "I won't let you die here," Patrick whispers, his resolve hardening. "Any of you." With that promise, he steps toward the bunker's exit, ready to face whatever dangers await on the surface. The fate of these abandoned alien girls now rests solely in the hands of one determined human, defying both his own kind and the harsh realities of a post-war world to save those deemed unworthy of salvation. Patrick's heart raced as he stepped out of the bunker. The weight of Lyra's frail body in his arms a stark reminder of the lives at stake. The alien world's harsh landscape stretched before him, a desolate expanse of jagged rock formations and swirling toxic dust. The first breath of the planet's atmosphere burned his lungs, despite the protective mask he wore. Patrick adjusted Lyra's makeshift respirator, a cobbled-together device from his medkit and salvaged Everin tech. Her large, luminous eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused and glassy with fever. "Hang in there, little one," he murmured, securing her tightly against his chest. Patrick set off at a brisk pace, his military-trained eyes constantly scanning for threats. The terrain was treacherous, with shifting sands concealing deep crevasses and razor-sharp rock outcroppings that could slice through his protective gear. As they traversed a field of twisted metal, the remnants of an Everin defense installation, Patrick's foot caught on a piece of debris. He stumbled, barely managing to keep his footing and protect Lyra from the impact. The near fall sent a jolt of adrenaline through his system, sharpening his focus. Hours into their journey, Patrick spotted a partially intact human military outpost. He approached cautiously, weapon at the ready. The structure's airlock hissed open, revealing a ransacked interior. Scavengers had clearly been here, but Patrick's trained eye spotted a few overlooked supplies. He worked quickly, jury-rigging a portable oxygen recycler from abandoned equipment. It wasn't pretty, but it would help conserve Lyra's dwindling air supply. As he attached the device to her respirator, Patrick noticed her skin had taken on a sickly gray pallor. "Just a little longer," he whispered, injecting her with the last of his combat stims, praying the human medication wouldn't harm her alien physiology. Back outside, Patrick's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of approaching vehicles. He ducked behind a dune, heart pounding as a group of rugged, well-armed individuals came into view. Their leader, a scarred man with cold eyes, stepped forward. Well, Patrick Turner," the man sneered. "Fancy meeting you here." Patrick's grip on Lyra tightened. "Garrett Reed, I'd say it's good to see you, but we both know that's a lie." Garrett's eyes narrowed, focusing on the alien child. "What have you got there, Turner? Some valuable Everin tech?" "She's a child, Reed, not tech. Let us pass." Garrett laughed harshly. "A child? She's the enemy, Turner. Or have you forgotten what those bastards did to Earth?" Patrick's lips pursed. "She's innocent. They all are." "Innocent or not, she'll fetch a good price." Garrett nodded to his men. "Take her." In one fluid motion, Patrick set Lyra down behind him and met the first attacker head-on. His fist connected with the man's jaw, sending him sprawling. Another rushed in, swinging a makeshift club. Patrick ducked, sweeping the attacker's legs out from under him. Garrett joined the fray, his combat knife flashing in the alien sun. Patrick barely avoided the blade, feeling it slice through his jacket. He retaliated with a vicious elbow strike, hearing the satisfying crunch of Garrett's nose breaking. The fight was brutal and swift. Patrick's superior training and desperate need to protect Lyra gave him the edge. Within minutes, Garrett and his men lay unconscious on the rocky ground. Patrick stood over them, breathing heavily. He could end this threat permanently, ensure they never endangered Lyra or the others again. But as he looked at their unconscious forms, he saw not enemies but fellow humans broken by war and circumstance. With a resigned sigh, Patrick bound their hands and feet, leaving them with a day's worth of water and rations. It was more than they deserved, perhaps, but he wouldn't stoop to their level. Scooping up Lyra, Patrick resumed his trek, pushing his body to its limits. The extraction point was close now, but Lyra's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Her breathing had become shallow and erratic, her skin hot to the touch even through his gloves. Patrick's mind raced, trying to recall every scrap of medical knowledge he possessed. In a moment of desperate inspiration, he combined the last of his human medical supplies with a piece of Everin biotech he'd scavenged. The resulting concoction was a risky gamble, but Lyra's only chance. As he administered the makeshift treatment, Patrick saw a flicker of life return to Lyra's eyes. It wasn't a cure, but it would buy her precious time. The distant whine of engines cut through the air. Patrick's heart leapt as he recognized the sleek silhouette of the smuggler's ship descending toward the extraction point. They'd made it. But his relief was short-lived. On the horizon, a plume of dust signaled the approach of military vehicles. Patrick's blood ran cold as he recognized the insignia. Captain Marcus Holt's patrol. Time seemed to slow as Patrick assessed his options. The smuggler's ship touched down, its hatch opening invitingly. The military patrol drew closer with each passing second. Patrick made his decision. He sprinted toward the ship. Lyra clutched tightly in his arms. The smuggler, a grizzled woman with calculating eyes, met him at the hatch. "Take her," Patrick said, handing over Lyra. "Get her to safety. I'll hold them off and be back for the others." The smuggler nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. As the ship's engines roared to life, Patrick turned to face the approaching patrol, his former brothers in arms, now his adversaries. Captain Holt's voice crackled over a loudspeaker. "Turner, stand down and surrender the alien." Patrick stood his ground, watching the smuggler's ship disappear into the sky with Lyra safely aboard. He raised his hands slowly, mind already formulating a plan to evade capture and return to the bunker. The military vehicles skidded to a halt, kicking up clouds of alien dust. As armed soldiers poured out, weapons trained on him, Patrick steeled himself for the confrontation ahead. The lives of 4 more Everin girls hung in the balance, and he'd be damned if he'd let them down now. As Captain Holt's patrol closed in, Patrick's mind raced. He couldn't afford to be captured now, not with 4 more lives depending on him. His eyes darted across the war-torn landscape, searching for an advantage. Suddenly, an idea struck. Patrick spotted a cluster of unexploded ordnance half buried in the alien soil, remnants of the recent conflict. With practiced efficiency, he grabbed a handful of the devices and set them for remote detonation. "Last chance, Turner," Holt's voice boomed through the loudspeaker. "Surrender now." Patrick raised his hands slowly, buying precious seconds. Then, in one fluid motion, he activated the detonators and dove for cover. The explosions rocked the area, sending plumes of toxic dust into the air. Confusion erupted among the patrol as they scrambled to respond to the perceived attack. Patrick seized the moment, slipping away in the chaos. He pushed his body to its limits, sprinting through concealed routes he'd memorized during countless missions. The bunker wasn't far now, but every second counted. Rounding a sharp bend, Patrick skidded to a stop. A massive sinkhole yawned before him, the ground having given way under the strain of the recent explosions. The chasm stretched for hundreds of meters in either direction. "Damn it," Patrick muttered, quickly assessing his options. He'd have to take the long way around, a treacherous path through even more hazardous terrain. As he navigated the new route, the sound of low growls caught his attention. Patrick froze, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. From the shadows of a twisted metal structure emerged a pack of native predators. Their eyes gleamed with an unnatural green light, bodies sleek and perfectly adapted to the toxic world around them. Patrick stood his ground as the creatures circled him. He'd heard stories of these beasts but had never encountered them firsthand. Their fangs dripped with what looked like corrosive saliva, capable of eating through protective gear. The largest of the pack lunged without warning. Patrick rolled, narrowly avoiding its snapping jaws. He came up firing, his weapon set to its highest output. The energy blast caught the creature mid-leap, sending it crashing to the ground. The others attacked en masse. Patrick fought with every ounce of his training and desperation. He used the terrain to his advantage, leading the beasts into tight spaces where they impeded each other. His makeshift club, fashioned from a piece of alien alloy, cracked against skulls and limbs. But he couldn't avoid every strike. Claws raked across his back, tearing through his protective suit. Patrick felt the sting of the planet's poisonous atmosphere seeping into the wound. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he pressed on. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, Patrick stood alone among the fallen predators. His body ached, blood seeping from multiple gashes. But there was no time to tend to his wounds. The bunker awaited. Patrick staggered the final distance, his vision blurring from exhaustion and injury. He input the access code with trembling fingers, nearly collapsing as the door slid open. Inside, the situation was dire. The life support systems sputtered and wheezed, clearly on their last legs. The 4 Everend girls huddled together, their breathing labored and eyes wide with fear. Aurora, the eldest, stumbled towards him. "Patrick," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "We thought you weren't coming back." "I made a promise," Patrick replied, forcing strength into his voice. He quickly assessed their condition. The signs of oxygen deprivation were clear: pallid skin, unfocused eyes, weakened limbs. They didn't have long. His mind raced through options. The smuggler wouldn't return in time. They needed a new plan, fast. Patrick's gaze fell on a battered Everend data terminal. An idea formed, risky, but their only shot. "Girls, listen carefully," he said, kneeling to meet their eyes. "There's an atmospheric processor not far from here. If we can reach it and get it working, we might buy ourselves some time." He set to work immediately, scrounging every bit of useful tech from the failing bunker. Using Everend components in his own ingenuity, Patrick cobbled together crude but functional breathing apparatuses for each girl. Next came transportation. The hover sled took shape from power cells and structural elements, held together by sheer perseverance and technical skill Patrick didn't know he possessed. As he worked, his military-grade communicator crackled to life. Patrick tensed, expecting Holt's voice to ring out with threats. Instead, he heard something unexpected: uncertainty. "Turner, this is Holt." The captain's voice wavered. What the hell are you really doing out there? Patrick paused, weighing his response. Saving lives, sir. Innocent lives. There was a long pause before Holt replied, God damn it, Turner. You're making this complicated. The transmission cut off, leaving Patrick with a glimmer of hope. Holt's wavering tenacity might buy them precious time. With the makeshift gear assembled, Patrick turned to the girls. It's time to move. Aurora, Celeste, you'll ride on the sled. Nova, Ilara, can you walk alongside me? The younger girls nodded weakly, tenacity shining in their large eyes. Patrick secured Aurora and Celeste on the hover sled, making sure their breathing apparatus was functioning. With a deep breath, he led the group out of the bunker and into the harsh alien world beyond. The journey was grueling. Patrick pulled the hover sled with every ounce of his remaining strength, while Nova and Ilara struggled to keep pace. They navigated through fields of noxious gas vents, the ground beneath their feet unstable and treacherous. Every step was a battle against exhaustion in the planet itself. Patrick's wounds throbbed, the toxic atmosphere seeping further into his system. But he pushed on, focused solely on reaching the atmospheric processor. As they crested a rise, Patrick's heart sank. An automated Everin defense turret loomed before them, its sensors already locking onto their position. The relic of war swiveled, preparing to fire. Patrick's mind raced. They couldn't go back, and any sudden movements might trigger the turret. He had seconds to act, to find a way through without endangering the already weakened girls. His eyes darted between the turret, the girls, and the harsh landscape around them. In that moment, Patrick realized that his next decision would determine not just their survival, but the success of his entire mission. The lives of these Evoran children, and perhaps the future of human-Evoran relations, hung in the balance. With no time to second-guess, Patrick stepped forward, placing himself between the turret and the girls. He raised his hand, ready to attempt the riskiest gambit of his life. Life. As his hand rose, Patrick's mind raced through possible outcomes, each more dire than the last. But before he could act, a flicker of movement caught his eye. To his astonishment, the turret's sensors seemed to recalibrate. Its ominous hum subsided, and the weapon powered down. Patrick blinked, hardly daring to believe their luck. Then he saw it, a faint shimmer in the air, revealing a cloaked figure approaching from behind the turret. The figure materialized fully, revealing a human in an advanced environmental suit. You look like you could use some help, the stranger said, voice distorted through the suit's comm system. Patrick tensed, ready for a fight, but the stranger raised their hands in a placating gesture. I'm Dr. Ilias Vega, xenobiologist, and you must be the rogue soldier I've heard so much chatter about. Patrick's eyes narrowed. How do I know I can trust you? Dr. Vega chuckled. Well, I did just save you from becoming target practice for that turret. But more importantly, he gestured to the atmospheric processor looming behind him. I think I have something you need. Patrick glanced back at the Everin girls, their breathing growing more labored by the second. He made his decision. All right, Doctor, what's your plan? First, let's get those children to safety, Vega said, already moving towards the hover sled. My team and I have been maintaining this processor. We can help them. As they approached the facility, Patrick noticed signs of recent activity. Footprints in the toxic dust, makeshift repairs to the exterior. His military instincts screamed caution, but the girl's condition left him no choice. Inside, Patrick was met with an unexpected sight. Humans and Evorans worked side by side, monitoring equipment and adjusting controls. Dr. Vega quickly explained, We're a research team. We stayed behind after the evacuation, believing cooperation between our species could lead to groundbreaking discoveries. The mixed team sprang into action, gathering medical supplies and preparing a secure area. As Everin medical specialists tended to the girls, Patrick recounted his mission to Dr. Vega. The xenobiologist listened intently, his expression growing grave. You've taken an enormous risk, Patrick, but you've also given us hope that reconciliation might be possible. Their conversation was cut short by an urgent alert from the processor's perimeter sensors. Dr. Vega's face paled as he studied the readout. We've got company, and they don't look friendly. Patrick peered at the screen, his blood running cold. He recognized the insignia on the approaching vehicles, a rogue military unit separate from Holt's patrol. "That's Major Blackwood's team," he growled. "They're here to finish what the war started." Dr. Vega's team mobilized with practiced efficiency, sealing entrances and activating defense systems. Patrick found himself working alongside Everin engineers, using his combat experience to fortify weak points. As they worked, Patrick's comm crackled to life. "Turner, this is Holt. You've stirred up a hornet's nest. Blackwood's on your tail, and he's out for blood." Patrick tensed. "Captain, I can explain." "Save it," Holt cut him off. "I've seen enough to know you're not the enemy here. I'll do what I can to slow Blackwood down. You focus on getting those kids to safety." The transmission ended, leaving Patrick stunned. He turned to find Dr. Vega watching him. "Looks like you've got friends in unexpected places," the xenobiologist remarked. Patrick nodded grimly. "We'll need every ally we can get. Blackwood won't stop until he's wiped out every Everin on this planet, children included." As if to punctuate his words, a distant explosion rocked the facility. Alarms blared as Blackwood's forces began their assault. Dr. Vega's voice cut through the chaos. "We've got the girls stabilized, but they need more time. We have to hold this position." Patrick checked his weapon, mind already formulating defensive strategies. He looked around at the unlikely allies surrounding him. Human scientists, Everin engineers, and a handful of converted soldiers like himself. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had one advantage Blackwood's forces lacked, a cause worth fighting for. As the first sounds of Blackwood's troops breaching the outer defenses reached them, Patrick steeled himself for the battle ahead. The processor had become their fortress, their last stand against the remnants of a war that should have ended long ago. And as he took up position beside his newfound allies, Patrick knew that the next few hours would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of human-Everin relations. The air crackled with tension as they waited for Blackwood's first move. Patrick's mind raced through possible scenarios, each more desperate than the last. But as he looked at the determined faces around him, human and Everin alike, he felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together, the first barrage of gunfire erupted, peppering the processor's outer walls with a hail of bullets. Patrick's military instincts kicked in. "Everyone, take cover!" he shouted, diving behind a nearby console. Dr. Vega and the others followed suit, narrowly avoiding the spray of debris as the gunfire intensified. In the chaos, Patrick's mind raced. They needed a plan, and fast. He caught Dr. Vega's eye and nodded toward a side corridor. "Doctor, we need to organize. Now." As the assault raged outside, Patrick, Dr. Vega, and key members of their makeshift team huddled in a more secure area of the processor. Patrick took charge, his voice steady despite the dire circumstances. "We're outgunned and outnumbered, but we have one advantage. This facility and the people in it, we need to use that." He turned to Dr. Vega. "Doctor, I need you to lead a medical team. Focus on stabilizing those girls. They're our priority." Dr. Vega nodded, his expression grim but determined. "I'll work with Dr. Zara. We'll combine our knowledge of human and Everin physiology. It might give us an edge." Patrick continued, addressing the group. "We'll split into 3 teams: medical, defense, and escape planning. I'll handle defense. We need to fortify this place, turn it into a fortress." A human engineer stepped forward. "I'm Marcus Chen. I can lead the escape team. There's an old Everin shuttle in the hangar. If we can get it operational, it might be our ticket out of here." An Everin with iridescent scales, Lyra, Patrick recalled, joined Marcus. "I'm a pilot. I can assist with the modifications." Patrick nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. "Good. Get to work immediately. We don't know how long we can hold out." As the teams dispersed, Patrick focused on defense. He scoured the facility, repurposing Everin tech and integrating it with human weaponry. Energy shields sprang to life at key entry points, while non-lethal traps were set to incapacitate Blackwood's forces. Hours passed in a blur of activity. In the medical bay, Dr. Vega and Dr. Zara worked tirelessly on the Everin girls. Aurora, the eldest, began to stir, her large eyes focusing on the doctors. Where "Where are we?" she asked weakly. Dr. Vega smiled reassuringly. "You're safe now. We're trying to help you and your sisters." Aurora's gaze sharpened. "Our biology, it's different. The atmosphere?" Dr. Zara leaned in, intrigued. "What can you tell us? Any information could help us treat you more effectively." As Aurora shared insights into Everin physiology, the medical team's efforts gained new direction and efficacy. Meanwhile, Patrick coordinated the defense efforts. The processor's layout was complex, with multiple levels and winding corridors. He used this to their advantage, creating choke points and ambush zones. Blackwood's first major assault came as night fell. Explosions rocked the facility as enemy forces attempted to breach the outer defenses. Patrick's voice rang out over the comm system. "All units, hold your positions. Remember your training." The battle was intense but brief. Patrick's strategies proved effective, and the combined human-Everin team worked in surprising harmony. Energy weapons sizzled through the air, meeting the conventional firearms of Blackwood's troops. When the dust settled, the attackers retreated, leaving the processor's defenses battered but intact. As Patrick assessed the damage, his comm crackled to life. "Turner, it's Holt." "Go ahead, Captain." Holt's voice was tense. "I've bought you some time, but it won't last. Blackwood's called for reinforcements. You've got less than 24 hours before a much larger force arrives." Patrick's stomach dropped. "Understood, sir. Thank you." He relayed the news to Dr. Vega and the team leaders. The urgency of their situation intensified. In the hangar, Marcus and Lyra redoubled their efforts on the shuttle. "We've made progress," Marcus reported, wiping sweat from his brow. "But we're missing a crucial component for the propulsion system. Without it, we're grounded." Lyra pointed to a schematic. "The part we need is in a storage unit on the other side of the facility, but with Blackwood's forces surrounding us." Patrick made a quick decision. "I'll lead a team to retrieve it. We can't afford to wait." As Patrick assembled a small squad for the retrieval mission, Dr. Vega approached him with a concerned expression. "Patrick, there's something you should know about the girls. Their DNA. It's not natural. They've been genetically modified." Patrick frowned. "Modified? How?" "I'm not sure yet," Dr. Vega admitted, "but it could explain their resilience to the toxic atmosphere. Whatever was done to them, it wasn't by accident." This new information deeply affected on Patrick as he led his team through the processor's winding corridors. They moved silently, aware that any noise could alert Blackwood's forces to their position. As they neared the storage unit, Patrick held up a hand, signaling the team to stop. Ahead, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting, was an unmarked door. Patrick's instincts told him to investigate. Inside, they discovered an abandoned Everin research lab. Dust-covered equipment lined the walls, and inactive screens flickered to life as they entered. Patrick approached the central console, his eyes widening as he read the display. "This is terraforming technology," he breathed. "Experimental but potentially capable of restoring the planet's atmosphere." The implications were staggering. With this data, not only could they save themselves, but potentially make the entire planet habitable for both species. Patrick's mind raced with the possibilities and the responsibility. A distant explosion snapped him back to reality. They still had a mission to complete. With a heavy heart, Patrick downloaded the terraforming data onto a portable drive. They would deal with its implications later. The team retrieved the needed component and began their perilous journey back. As they approached the central hub, alarms blared throughout the facility. Blackwood had launched another assault, this time breaching one of the outer defenses. Patrick and his team rushed back, component in hand, only to find chaos. Smoke filled the corridors as defenders fell back to inner sections of the processor. The situation was critical. As Marcus hurried to install the retrieved component, Patrick found himself faced with an impossible choice. Stay and fight, buying time for the shuttle preparations but risking everyone's lives? Or begin an immediate evacuation with an incomplete ship, gambling their survival on an unfinished escape plan. The weight of command pressed down on Patrick as explosions rocked the facility. Time was running out, and the lives of everyone inside human and Everin alike, hung in the balance. Whatever decision he made would shape not just their fate, but potentially the future of both species. Patrick took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The next few moments would determine everything, and he knew that every second counted. Counted. Patrick's eyes darted between the faces of his companions, each waiting for his decision. The weight of command had never felt heavier. "We evacuate, now," Patrick said, his voice firm despite the chaos around them. "Marcus, how close are we on the shuttle?" Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, his hands still working on the shuttle's control panel. "We've got basic systems online, but it's far from optimal. I need more time." Another explosion rocked the facility, cutting him off. Patrick shook his head. "Time's the one thing we don't have. We'll have to risk it." Dr. Vega stepped forward, concern etched on his face. "Patrick, the girls—" "They're our priority," Patrick assured him. "You and your team will be on the first transport with them. No arguments." As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the processor. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Inner defenses breached. All personnel, fall back to designated safe zones." Patrick sprang into action, organizing the survivors into groups. "Dr. Vega, get your team and the girls to the shuttle. Marcus, Lyra, you're with them. Focus on keeping that bird in the air." As the first group hurried toward the hangar, Patrick turned to the remaining defenders. "We need to buy them time. Form a perimeter around the main corridor. Use the choke points we set up earlier." The sound of gunfire grew closer as Patrick led a small team to the front lines. They took cover behind makeshift barricades. Energy weapons at the ready. The first of Blackwood's soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor, and the air filled with the sizzle of energy blasts and the crack of conventional firearms. In the midst of the firefight, Patrick noticed something unexpected. Some of Blackwood's men seemed hesitant, their shots going wide. He caught snippets of their communications. "Are we sure about this? They've got civilians in there." "I signed up to fight aliens, not other humans." Patrick seized the opportunity. He activated his comm, broadcasting on an open channel. "Attention, all combatants. We have human scientists and Everan children under our protection. We're attempting a peaceful evacuation. Stand down and no one else needs to get hurt today." The effect was immediate. Several of Blackwood's soldiers lowered their weapons, looking uncertain. Others continued firing, but with less intensity. Back in the medical bay, Dr. Vega and his team worked frantically to prepare the Everin girls for transport. As they secured Aurora to a stretcher, her eyes suddenly flew open, glowing with an otherworldly light. "Doctor," she said, her voice eerily calm amid the chaos, "I can help." Before Dr. Vega could respond, Aurora closed her eyes in concentration. In the corridor, Patrick watched in amazement as several of the attacking soldiers suddenly dropped their weapons, clutching their heads. "What the—" Patrick began, but was cut off by Aurora's voice in his mind. "I can guide your defenders," she said telepathically. "Show them where the danger is greatest." Patrick didn't have time to question this new development. He simply nodded, trusting his instincts. "Do it." With Aurora's unexpected assistance, the defenders began to move with uncanny precision, anticipating the attackers' movements. It gave them the edge they needed to hold the line. In the hangar, Marcus and Lyra worked feverishly on the shuttle systems. Sparks flew as they made last-minute connections, the sound of battle growing ever closer. "Lyra, we need more power to the stabilizers," Marcus shouted over the din. The Everin pilot's hands flew over the controls, her iridescent scales shimmering in the emergency lighting. "Rerouting power from non-essential systems. It's not pretty, but it should hold." As Dr. Vega's team arrived with the Everin girls, they were met with an unexpected sight. Celeste, the 12-year-old, had broken free from her restraints. Instead of fleeing, she was single-handedly lifting a heavy crate of supplies onto the shuttle. "Incredible," Dr. Vega muttered, his scientific curiosity warring with the urgent need for haste. Just as the first group prepared to board, the hangar doors burst open. Patrick's heart sank as he recognized the figure leading the charge, Major Blackwood himself, flanked by his elite squad. "Turner," Blackwood roared, raising his weapon. "You traitor." Before Patrick could respond, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Stand down, Major." Captain Holt strode into the hangar, accompanied by a small group of soldiers. Their weapons were trained not on Patrick's group, but on Blackwood's forces. "Captain?" Patrick said, disbelief evident in his voice. "What are you—" "Doing the right thing for once," Holt replied grimly. "Now get those people out of here. We'll hold them off." With Holt's unexpected reinforcements turning the tide, Patrick directed the first group onto the shuttle. The engines roared to life, the entire frame shuddering as the makeshift repairs held. "Go!" Patrick shouted to Marcus. "Get them to safety!" As the shuttle lifted off, Patrick made a split-second decision. He turned to Holt, purpose in his eyes. "We're staying to secure the hangar. That shuttle will need to make multiple trips." Holt nodded, a hint of respect in his expression. "Agreed. Let's show these boys how real soldiers fight." The battle in the hangar intensified as the shuttle disappeared into the toxic atmosphere. Patrick, Holt, and their small band of defenders took cover behind cargo containers, exchanging fire with Blackwood's forces. In the midst of the firefight, a young soldier from Blackwood's squad suddenly turned, firing on his own comrades. "This is wrong, he shouted, diving behind Patrick's position. "I'm Corporal Alex Foster. I want to help." Patrick nodded grimly, handing Alex a spare energy weapon. "Welcome aboard, Corporal. Let's hope we live long enough to regret this." As they fought to secure the hangar, Patrick's mind raced. The shuttle was gone, carrying the first group to safety, but it would return, and they had to ensure it had a place to land. More importantly, they had to protect the terraforming data, information that could change everything. The battle raged on, with no clear end in sight. Patrick and his unlikely allies held their ground, knowing that their actions in the next few hours could shape the future of two species. The toxic atmosphere swirled outside the hangar's force field, a constant reminder of the hostile world they fought to change. In the distance, the faint sound of the shuttle's engines could be heard, growing steadily louder. Patrick gripped his weapon tighter, preparing for the next wave of Blackwood's assault. The real challenge was just beginning. The real challenge was just starting to unfold. As the sound of the returning shuttle grew louder, Patrick made a split-second decision. "Everyone, fall back to the hangar control room," he shouted over the din of battle. "We need to secure a landing zone." The small group of defenders retreated in an orderly fashion, covering each other as they moved. Captain Holt provided suppressing fire, his experience evident in every precise shot. Corporal Foster, the young defector, helped a wounded comrade limp to safety. Once inside the control room, Patrick quickly assessed their situation. The reinforced walls provided temporary shelter, but they were effectively trapped. Major Blackwood's forces regrouped outside, preparing for what would undoubtedly be a fierce assault. "All right, people, we're in for a long haul," Patrick announced, his voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. "Foster, I need you on communications. Monitor all frequencies and keep an eye out for the shuttle's approach." The young corporal nodded, moving to the control panel. "Yes, sir." Patrick turned to Captain Holt. "Captain, I need you to take charge of our supplies and tend to any injuries. We can't afford to lose anyone." Holt's expression was grim but determined. "Understood. I'll make every medkit and ration count." As the others set about their tasks, Patrick's mind raced. They needed a way to buy more time, to keep Blackwood's forces at bay until the shuttle returned. His eyes darted around the control room, searching for anything they could use to their advantage. That's when he noticed it. A faded schematic on the wall, barely visible under years of dust. Patrick wiped it clean, revealing a network of maintenance tunnels running throughout the processor. "This could be our ace in the hole," he muttered, studying the diagram intently. Patrick quickly formulated a plan. He selected a small team, including himself and two of their most agile fighters. They would use the maintenance tunnels to conduct hit-and-run attacks on Blackwood's forces, disrupting their operations and keeping them off balance. Before leaving, Patrick pulled Captain Holt aside. "If we're not back in 30 minutes, assume the worst. Your priority is to protect the terraforming data and get everyone on that shuttle when it returns." Holt clasped Patrick's shoulder. "We'll be here. Good hunting." Patrick led his team into the cramped maintenance tunnel, the stale air thick with dust and the lingering scent of machine oil. They moved silently, using hand signals to communicate as they navigated the maze-like passages. After what felt like an eternity of crawling through dark, claustrophobic spaces, they reached a junction near Blackwood's main staging area. Patrick peered through a grate, observing the enemy's movements and listening to their communications. He signaled his team to ready their weapons. In a coordinated strike, they burst from multiple access points, catching Blackwood's soldiers completely off guard. Energy blasts sizzled through the air as Patrick and his team unleashed a barrage of fire before quickly retreating into the tunnels. The guerrilla-style attack worked better than Patrick had hoped. Blackwood's forces were thrown into disarray, unable to effectively respond to an enemy they couldn't see or predict. As they made their way back through the tunnels, Patrick's team stumbled upon an unexpected windfall, a hidden Everin weapons cache. The alien technology was leagues beyond anything they currently possessed. "This changes everything," Patrick said, examining one of the sleek, unfamiliar weapons. "Let's get these back to the others." When they returned to the control room, the mood shifted from tense anticipation to cautious optimism. The advanced Everin weaponry gave them a fighting chance against Blackwood's superior numbers. Hours passed as they settled into a grueling routine of defense and counterattack. Patrick organized rotating shifts, ensuring everyone got at least some rest between engagements. The Everin weapons proved their worth, allowing the defenders to push back several of Blackwood's assaults and expand their defensive perimeter around the hangar. During a lull in the fighting, Patrick and Captain Holt huddled over the terraforming data they had recovered earlier. As they studied the complex information, an idea began to form. "If we can access the processor's main systems," Patrick mused, "we might be able to use this data to create localized atmospheric disturbances. It could give us another edge against Blackwood." Holt nodded, his expression a mix of concern and persistence. "It's risky. We could end up damaging the life support systems." "At this point, we need every advantage we can get," Patrick replied. They set to work, using the terraforming data to manipulate the processor's environmental controls. The effects were almost immediate. Pockets of dense fog began to form in key areas, obscuring visibility and hampering Blackwood's movements. As another wave of attacks broke against their defenses, Corporal Foster's voice cut through the chaos. "Sir, long-range scanners are picking up multiple incoming ships." Patrick's heart sank. If Blackwood had called for reinforcements, their situation would become untenable. He rushed to the scanner display, studying the incoming signatures with growing apprehension. Foster's fingers flew over the controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. After a tense moment, his eyes widened in surprise. "Sir, you're not going to believe this. It's a joint human Everin peacekeeping force." A ripple of shock went through the control room. Patrick exchanged a look of disbelief with Captain Holt, who seemed equally stunned by this turn of events. Before they could fully process this new development, alarms blared throughout the facility. Major Blackwood's voice, tight with barely held back fury, echoed over the comms. "All units, this is Blackwood. We have incoming hostiles. I want that hangar secured now. This is our last chance. Failure is not an option." Patrick gripped his weapon tightly, steeling himself for what was sure to be Blackwood's most desperate and dangerous assault yet. The sound of heavy weapons fire grew closer, punctuated by the screech of metal as the hangar's outer defenses began to buckle. "Everyone to your positions," Patrick shouted, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "This is it. We hold the line here and now." As Blackwood's forces breached the outer perimeter of the hangar, Patrick caught a welcome sight through the hangar's force field. The shuttle was returning, its engines burning bright against the toxic atmosphere. Their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. With the lives of his companions and the future of human-Everin relations hanging in the balance, Patrick prepared to make his stand. The next few moments would determine everything, and he was determined to see it through, whatever it takes. The thunderous roar of the shuttle's engines filled the hangar as it touched down, its landing struts groaning under the weight. Patrick and his team provided covering fire, their newly acquired Everin weapons cutting through the air with deadly precision. "Move! Move!" Patrick shouted, ushering the remaining survivors toward the waiting shuttle. As the last of his people boarded, Patrick caught sight of Major Blackwood charging forward, his face contorted with rage. Before Blackwood could close the distance, a blinding light engulfed the hangar. The peacekeeping force had arrived. Sleek ships of both human and Everan design descended through the atmosphere, their weapons trained on Blackwood's forces. A booming voice echoed through the facility. "This is Admiral Chen of the Joint Peacekeeping Fleet. All combatants are ordered to stand down immediately." In the face of overwhelming force, even Blackwood had no choice but to comply. Patrick watched as the Major threw down his weapon, his expression a mixture of defeat and lingering defiance. With the immediate threat neutralized, Patrick boarded the shuttle. As they ascended through the toxic atmosphere, he allowed himself a moment of relief. The Everan girls were safe, the terraforming data secure. But as he gazed out at the fleet of peacekeeping ships, he knew their journey was just the beginning. The shuttle docked with the largest of the peacekeeping vessels, a massive carrier that dwarfed anything Patrick had seen before. As they disembarked, Patrick was struck by the sight of humans and Evorans working side by side, their movements conveying a sense of urgency and shared purpose. A tall, distinguished-looking man in a crisp uniform approached them. "Patrick Turner, I'm Admiral Chen. We need to move quickly. You and your team will be transferred to Unity Station immediately." "Unity Station?" Patrick asked, falling into step beside the Admiral. Chen nodded, his pace brisk as they moved through the ship's corridors. "It's a neutral meeting ground for human and Evoran diplomats. Given what you've discovered, it's now the most important place in the galaxy." Within hours, Patrick found himself aboard another shuttle, this one bound for Unity Station. As they approached, he couldn't help but marvel at the structure. It was a triumph of joint engineering, its sweeping lines and gleaming surfaces a testament to what humans and Everans could achieve together. Upon docking, Patrick and his team were greeted by a welcoming committee, led by a man whose very posture exuded diplomacy. "Welcome to Unity Station. I'm Ambassador Marcus Steele," he said, extending his hand. "We have much to discuss." As they walked through the station's pristine corridors, Steele brought them up to speed. "The situation is delicate. Both our governments are intensely interested in the terraforming data and the girls." Patrick instinctively moved closer to Aurora, Celeste, Nova, and Alara. The girls had been through so much already. He was determined to protect them from becoming pawns in some political game. They were led to a large conference room where a team of medical professionals, both human and Everan, waited. Dr. Vega stepped forward, his excitement awe-inspiring. "We've set up a temporary lab here. With your permission, we'd like to begin examining the girls and analyzing the terraforming data immediately." Patrick hesitated, looking at the girls. Aurora, the eldest, met his gaze and nodded slightly. He turned back to Dr. Vega. "All right, but I want to be present for all examinations." As the medical team began their work, Patrick watched in amazement. The girls' abilities seemed to have grown even since their escape from the planet. Aurora's telepathic range had expanded significantly, allowing her to communicate with the Everan members of the team without difficulty. Celeste's strength continued to astound as she effortlessly moved equipment that would challenge multiple adult humans. But it was Nova and Alara who truly surprised him. Nova, her brow furrowed in concentration, created shimmering fields of energy that danced between her fingertips, and Alara, when accidentally cut by a medical instrument, healed before their very eyes. Dr. Vega's voice was filled with awe as he reviewed the results. "Their genetic modifications are far more extensive than we initially believed. They're not just enhanced humans or Everans. They're something entirely new." As the examinations continued, Patrick noticed increased activity outside the lab. Diplomats and officials from both species hurried through the corridors, their faces etched with concern. Ambassador Steele entered the lab, his expression grave. "We have a situation developing," Steele said, gesturing for Patrick to join him. "A delegation of hardline human militants has just arrived, led by Colonel Victor Hargrove, and we've received word that an Everan delegation, under High Commander Zarek, is en route." Patrick's heart sank. He knew Hargrove by reputation, a decorated war hero with a deep-seated distrust of the Everans. And while he hadn't heard of Zarek, the title of High Commander suggested someone of significant influence. "What do they want?" Patrick asked, already suspecting the answer. Steele's expression was grim. "The same thing everyone wants. The girls and the terraforming data. Hargrove sees them as potential weapons, while Zarek is pushing for the girls' immediate repatriation." Patrick's mind raced. The fragile peace they'd achieved was balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move could plunge both species back into conflict. He looked back at the girls, each of them unique and incredible, yet so vulnerable in this world of adult machinations. "We need to protect them," Patrick said, his voice low but firm. "And we need to ensure the terraforming data is used for its intended purpose, to heal worlds, not control them." Steele nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Agreed. But tread carefully, Turner. Unity Station is about to become a powder keg of competing interests. We'll need all your skills, both as a soldier and a diplomat, if we're going to navigate this situation." As if to underscore Steele's words, alarms began to blare throughout the station. A voice came over the intercom, tense but controlled. "Security alert. All personnel report to designated safe zones. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Patrick's hand instinctively went to his weapon as he moved to shield the girls. Whatever was coming, he was determined to face it head-on. The real challenge, it seemed, was just beginning. Beginning. The thunderous roar of the shuttle's engines filled the hangar as the station's alarms continued to blare. Patrick's instincts, honed by years of combat experience, screamed danger. He scanned the room, noting the tense expressions on the faces of both humans and Everans. The air crackled with an almost palpable tension. Suddenly, the lab's reinforced doors buckled under a tremendous impact. Patrick's hand flew to his weapon as he positioned himself between the girls and the impending threat. The doors burst open, revealing a squad of heavily armed humans led by a stern-faced man Patrick recognized as Colonel Victor Hargrove. "Surrender the Everan subjects and the terraforming data immediately," Hargrove barked, his rifle trained on Patrick. Before Patrick could respond, a blinding flash of blue energy erupted from behind him. Nova, her small face scrunched in concentration, had created a shimmering energy barrier between them and Hargrove's forces. "Dr. Vega, secure the data," Patrick shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. He turned to Aurora, the eldest of the Everan girls. "Can you sense any other threats?" Aurora's eyes glowed faintly as she extended her telepathic senses. "There are more coming. Everans. They're angry." As if on cue, the station rocked with a series of explosions. Alarms blared even louder, accompanied by the sound of tearing metal and shattering glass. "All personnel, this is a station-wide alert," a voice crackled over the intercom. "We are under attack by multiple hostile forces. Proceed to designated safe zones immediately." Patrick's mind raced. They needed to move. But where? The lab was quickly becoming a death trap. "Captain Holt," he called out, spotting the officer near a bank of monitors. "We need an exit strategy. Now!" Holt nodded grimly, his fingers flying over the station's schematics. "There's a maintenance shaft 2 levels down. It leads to the emergency shuttle bays." Patrick made a split-second decision. "All right, everyone move out. Dr. Vega, grab what you can of the research. We're leaving." As they prepared to move, the station shuttered again. Through the lab's viewport, Patrick saw several sleek Everan ships engaging with human vessels, energy weapons lighting up the void of space. "This way," Holt shouted, leading them towards a service corridor. They moved swiftly through the station's winding passageways, the sounds of battle growing closer with each step. Twice they were forced to take cover as groups of armed combatants, both human and Everan, crossed their path. Aurora's telepathic abilities proved invaluable, allowing them to avoid the worst of the fighting. Celeste used her incredible strength to clear debris and create paths where none existed before. As they descended a maintenance ladder towards the shuttle bay, a group of Everan extremists ambushed them. Energy bolts sizzled past Patrick's head as he returned fire, his newly acquired Everan weapon cutting through their attackers' defenses. "Nova shield, turn on," he called out. The young girl complied instantly, creating a protective barrier around their group. Ilara, the youngest, clung to Dr. Vega, her small hands glowing as she used her healing abilities to treat a nasty burn on the scientist's arm. They burst into the shuttle bay, only to find it in chaos. Smoke filled the air, punctuated by the staccato of weapons fire and the screams of the wounded. "There!" Holt pointed to a sleek shuttle at the far end of the bay. "That's our ticket out of here." As they sprinted towards their escape vessel, a familiar voice rang out. "Patrick Turner." Patrick turned to see Ambassador Steele stumbling towards them, clutching his side. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Ambassador," Patrick rushed to support the injured man. "What happened?" "Hargrove's men," Steele gasped. "They're after the girls and the data. You need to get them out of here. There's more at stake than you know." Before Patrick could press for details, a hail of energy bolts forced them to take cover behind a stack of cargo containers. He peered around the edge, his heart sinking at the sight of Colonel Hargrove leading a squad of heavily armed troops into the bay. "Surrender now, Turner," Hargrove's voice boomed across the hangar. "There's nowhere left to run." Patrick looked at the frightened faces around him. The girls, Dr. Vega, Captain Holt, and the injured Ambassador Steele. He knew that whatever happened next would shape the future of human-Everan relations for generations to come. His grip tightened on his weapon as he prepared to make a stand. The real fight, it seemed, was just beginning. Patrick's mind raced, analyzing their options. The shuttle bay was a war zone, with Hargrove's forces closing in fast. "Nova, can you extend your shield?" Patrick asked, his voice steady despite the chaos. The young Everan girl nodded, her face scrunched in concentration. The shimmering energy barrier expanded, enveloping their group as they made a dash for the shuttle. Energy bolts ricocheted off Nova's shield as they ran. Celeste, using her immense strength, cleared a path through the debris. Aurora's telepathic warnings allowed them to anticipate and avoid enemy movements. They reached the shuttle just as Nova's shield began to flicker. Patrick ushered everyone inside, providing covering fire as Captain Holt took the pilot's seat. "Hold on!" Holt shouted as he fired up the engines. The shuttle lurched forward, narrowly avoiding a barrage of weapons fire. Patrick watched through the viewport as Unity Station grew smaller, the battle around it intensifying. "Where to?" Holt asked, his hands flying over the controls. Before Patrick could respond, Ambassador Steele spoke up, his voice weak but determined. "There's a specially outfitted ship docked at Emergency Bay 17. It's called the Harmony. Take us there." Holt nodded, adjusting their course. As they approached, Patrick saw the ship, sleek, advanced, and clearly designed for long-range missions. "That's our ticket out of here," Steele said, wincing as Dr. Vega tended to his wound. "It's stocked and ready for your mission to XR-27. XR-27, Patrick asked, confusion evident in his voice. "An uncharted planet," Steele explained. "It's where you'll find the answers we need." The shuttle docked with the Harmony, and the group quickly transferred aboard. As Patrick helped Steele into the medical bay, the ambassador grabbed his arm. "Patrick, there's more at stake than you know. Trust no one but your team and the girls. The future of both our species depends on it." With those cryptic words, Steele lost consciousness. Patrick turned to find Dr. Vega and Captain Holt waiting for his orders. "Let's get out of here," Patrick said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The Harmony disengaged from the station, its advanced engines propelling them away from the chaos. As they cleared the battle zone, Patrick allowed himself a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. "Sir," one of the Everan crew members called out, "long-range scanners are picking up an unusual energy signature. It's coming from a nearby asteroid field." Patrick studied the readout, his curiosity piqued. "Could be connected to the attack on Unity Station. We should investigate." As they approached the asteroid field, the source of the energy signature became clear. A massive derelict spacecraft, partially embedded in one of the larger asteroids. "Prepare a boarding party," Patrick ordered. "Captain Holt, you're with me. Dr. Vega, stay here with the girls and monitor our progress." Aurora stepped forward, her eyes glowing faintly. "I can maintain telepathic contact with you, Patrick. It'll be safer than using comms." Patrick nodded, grateful for her ability. As he prepared to board the derelict ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever they found inside would change everything. The boarding party, consisting of Patrick, Captain Holt, Alex Foster, and two Everin security officers made their way through the airlock. The derelict ship's corridors were dark and eerily silent, filled with technology that seemed to be a fusion of human and Everin design. "This doesn't make sense," Holt muttered, examining a control panel. "It's like someone cobbled together tech from both our species." Suddenly, the ship's automated defense system sprang to life. Energy beams crisscrossed the corridor, forcing the team to take cover. "Aurora," Patrick thought, reaching out through their telepathic link. "We need a safe route to the ship's core." Back on the Harmony, Aurora's mind raced through the derelict ship's layout. "There's a maintenance shaft 2 levels down," she communicated. "It should bypass most of the defenses." Guided by Aurora's telepathic directions, the team fought their way deeper into the ship. They encountered more automated defenses, each more challenging than the last. As they neared the central computer core, Patrick felt a sense of unease. "Something's not right," he whispered to Holt. "This tech, it's too advanced. It's beyond both human and Everin capabilities." They breached the core, and Patrick's suspicions were confirmed. The room was filled with holographic displays showing detailed information on human and Evoran military capabilities, along with intricate plans for prolonging the conflict between the two species. "My God," Holt breathed. "Someone's been playing both sides." As Patrick began downloading the data, Aurora's voice rang in his head. "Patrick, danger! Hostiles approaching!" The warning came just as a group of cybernetically enhanced soldiers burst into the room. They were neither fully human nor Everin, their bodies a grotesque fusion of flesh and machine. A fierce firefight erupted. Captain Holt took a hit to the shoulder, crying out in pain. Alex Foster, displaying unexpected bravery, laid down covering fire as Patrick and the others tried to retreat. "Patrick!" Nova's voice came through the telepathic link. "The ship's power core is overloading. It's going to explode." Time seemed to slow as Patrick assessed their options. The data download was complete, but they were pinned down by enemy fire. Alex was holding them off, but they couldn't all make it out in time. "Go!" Alex shouted, his face set with purpose. "I'll hold them off." Patrick hesitated for a split second before making the hardest decision of his life. "We'll come back for you," he promised, knowing it might be a lie. They retreated, carrying the wounded Holt and the precious data. As they reached the Harmony, the derelict ship's self-destruct sequence initiated. The explosion rocked their ship, destroying much of the asteroid field in a spectacular burst of energy. As the Harmony sped away from the devastation, Patrick stared at the data they'd recovered. The name Equilibrium Directive flashed across the screen, along with details of hidden bases and sleeper agents embedded in both human and Everin societies. The mission had become far more complex and dangerous than he could have imagined. As they set course for the uncharted planet XR-27, Patrick knew that the fate of two species now rested in their hands. The answers they sought lay ahead, but so did untold dangers. Patrick turned to his crew, their faces a mix of willpower and fear. "Prepare for landing," he ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of their newfound responsibility. "We have work to do." As the Harmony approached XR-27, Patrick stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the interface. The uncharted planet loomed before them, a swirling mass of blues and greens beneath wispy cloud cover. "Sir, long-range scanners are picking up an unusual energy signature from the surface," reported the Everin sensor officer. "It's similar to the one we encountered in the asteroid field." Patrick's brow furrowed. "Can you pinpoint the source?" The officer's fingers danced across the console. "Coordinates locked. It's coming from a region near the equator." Patrick made a swift decision. "Alter our landing coordinates. We need to investigate this." As they entered the planet's atmosphere, the ship began to shudder violently. Warning alarms blared across the bridge. "What's happening?" Patrick shouted over the din. Dr. Vega's voice crackled over the comm. "Severe electromagnetic interference. It's affecting our systems." The ship lurched, nearly throwing Patrick off his feet. He grabbed the nearest console to steady himself. "Can we maintain control?" "Barely," Holt grunted from the pilot's seat, his injured shoulder making it difficult to operate the controls. "The automated systems are failing." Suddenly, Celeste appeared on the bridge, her young face set with commitment. Without a word, she moved to the manual stabilizer controls. Her enhanced strength allowed her to operate the heavy machinery with ease, keeping the ship level as they descended through the turbulent atmosphere. The Harmony touched down roughly in a clearing, the dense alien vegetation visible through the viewports. As the engines powered down, Patrick took a deep breath. They had made it. "Good work, everyone," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "Dr. Vega, set up a medical bay for Captain Holt. Celeste, Lyra, I need you to help establish a secure perimeter around the ship." Patrick quickly organized two teams. He would lead the exploration team to investigate the energy signature, while Dr. Vega would oversee the base camp and tend to Holt's injuries. As Patrick's team prepared to disembark, he addressed them. "We don't know what we're walking into out there. Stay alert and stick together." They stepped out onto the alien world, the air heavy with unfamiliar scents. The vegetation was unlike anything Patrick had ever seen. Plants with iridescent leaves that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Vines that coiled and uncoiled as if alive. Nova took point, using her energy manipulation to clear a path through the dense undergrowth. Aurora walked beside Patrick, her eyes darting back and forth as she scanned their surroundings telepathically. As they trekked deeper into the alien forest, Patrick noticed strange creatures scurrying in the shadows. Bioluminescent insects buzzed around them, their glow intensifying as the team passed. Suddenly, Aurora stumbled, clutching her head. "Patrick," she gasped, "I feel something, a presence. It's overwhelming." Before Patrick could respond, they emerged into a clearing. There, partially buried in the ground, stood an immense structure. Its surface was a mix of sleek metal and what appeared to be organic matter, pulsing with the same energy signature they had detected from orbit. As they approached, Patrick spotted an entrance sealed with a strange combination of technology and living tissue. "This has to be the source of the energy signature," he muttered, reaching out to touch the surface. Without warning, energy bolts sizzled past them. Patrick spun around to see a group of cybernetically enhanced soldiers emerging from the forest, their weapons trained on the team. "Take cover!" Patrick shouted, diving behind a fallen alien tree trunk. Nova quickly erected energy shields, the enemy fire dissipating against them. Aurora, having recovered from her psychic episode, called out, "Patrick, they're moving to flank us on the left." Patrick nodded, signaling one of the security officers to cover that side. As the officer moved, an energy bolt caught him in the chest. He fell with a cry, but instead of collapsing, his body began to contort and change. "It's a trap!" Patrick yelled, watching in horror as the officer's form shifted, revealing the grotesque fusion of man and machine he had seen on the derelict ship. The transformed agent lunged at Patrick with inhuman speed and strength. Patrick barely managed to dodge, feeling the rush of air as the agent's enhanced fist narrowly missed his head. He grappled with the transformed officer, their struggle bringing them closer to the sealed entrance of the ancient structure. As they neared the entrance, the organic matter covering it seemed to react to their presence. Tendrils of living tissue reached out, wrapping around the agent's limbs. With a final burst of strength, Patrick pushed the agent towards the entrance. The organic matter enveloped him, pulling him into the structure before sealing shut once more. Panting heavily, Patrick turned back to his team. The other cybernetic soldiers had retreated into the forest, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. "Everyone okay?" he called out, scanning the group for injuries. Nova nodded, lowering her energy shields. Aurora approached Patrick, her face pale. "There's something inside that structure," she said quietly. "Something ancient and powerful." Patrick looked back at the sealed entrance, a mix of curiosity and apprehension washing over him. He activated his comlink. "Base camp, this is Patrick. We've encountered hostiles in an unknown structure. Send reinforcements to our location. We're going to need to investigate further." As the alien sun began to set, casting long shadows across the clearing, Patrick knew that their mission had just become far more complicated. The presence of the Equilibrium Directive on this uncharted world meant that XR-27 held secrets beyond their imagination. Secrets that could reshape the future of both humans and Everans. With a final glance at the mysterious structure, Patrick began setting up a temporary camp. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and they needed to be prepared for whatever XR-27 had in store for them. As the first rays of dawn pierced through the alien canopy, Patrick gathered his team for a final briefing before they ventured into the mysterious structure. "Everyone clear on the plan?" he asked, his eyes scanning the determined faces before him. Aurora, Nova, and the two newly arrived security officers, Marcus and Olivia, nodded in unison. Patrick activated his comlink. "Dr. Vega, do you copy? We're about to enter the structure." "Copy that, Patrick." Dr. Vega's voice crackled through the comm. "Be careful in there. We'll monitor your progress from base camp." With a final nod to his team, Patrick approached the sealed entrance. The organic matter covering it remained motionless, showing no signs of the previous day's activity. Nova stepped forward, her hands glowing with energy as she scanned the structure. "I'm detecting fluctuations in the energy field," she reported, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's unlike anything I've encountered before." Aurora closed her eyes, reaching out with her telepathic abilities. "There's a residue," she murmured. "Echoes of thoughts, ancient and alien." As they examined the entrance, Patrick noticed something odd. "Look here," he said, brushing away a tangle of iridescent vines. Beneath the vegetation, a panel of sleek, unfamiliar metal gleamed in the early morning light. Marcus and Olivia took up defensive positions as Patrick carefully cleared away the remaining growth. The exposed panel was covered in intricate swirling patterns that seemed to shift under his gaze. Suddenly, the panel sprang to life. A holographic display materialized above it, filled with complex symbols that danced and rearranged themselves. "Aurora," Patrick called, "can you make sense of this?" The young telepath stepped closer, her eyes widening as she studied the alien script. "It's communicating with me," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I can feel the meaning behind the symbols." As Aurora worked to decipher the interface, Patrick's comm unit buzzed urgently. "Sir," came the voice of the sensor officer back at the ship, "we're detecting multiple incoming signals. Looks like Equilibrium Directive forces." Patrick's lips pursed. "How many?" "At least 24, sir. Mix of ground troops and aerial drones. ETA 5 minutes. "Understood. We'll hold our position here." Patrick turned to his team. "Marcus, Olivia, set up a perimeter. Use the terrain for cover. Nova, be ready with those energy barriers." As the team scrambled to prepare their defenses, Aurora continued her work on the alien interface. Patrick could see the strain on her face as she grappled with the unfamiliar language. The first volley of enemy fire came just as Aurora let out a triumphant cry. "I've got it!" she exclaimed. The sealed entrance began to rumble and shift, organic matter peeling away to reveal a dark passage beyond. But there was no time to celebrate. The air filled with the whine of energy weapons as the Equilibrium Directive forces launched their assault. Nova's energy barrier sprang to life, deflecting the initial barrage. Patrick found himself back-to-back with Marcus, returning fire as cybernetically enhanced soldiers emerged from the underbrush. The alien forest came alive with the sounds of battle, energy beams crisscrossing through the air and scorching the luminescent foliage. As Patrick rolled to avoid a blast, he noticed something strange. Where the energy weapons had struck the local plant life, the vegetation was rapidly growing and shifting, reaching out to entangle the nearest combatants. "The ecosystem," Patrick shouted to his team. "It's responding to the energy weapons. Use it to our advantage." Nova caught on quickly, using her abilities to direct energy pulses into the surrounding flora. Vines and tendrils erupted from the ground, ensnaring several enemy soldiers and drones. The battle raged on, with Patrick and his team fighting desperately to hold their position. The entrance to the structure continued to open agonizingly slowly, leaving them exposed. Just as it seemed they might be overwhelmed, a familiar voice rang out over the chaos. "Cavalry's here!" Captain Holt, his arms still in a sling but his eyes blazing with drive, led a group of reinforcements from the base camp. Their arrival turned the tide, pushing back the Equilibrium Directive forces. "Go!" Holt shouted to Patrick. We'll hold them off. Patrick hesitated for a split second before making the call. Aurora, Nova with me. Marcus, Olivia, stay with Holt. As soon as the opening was wide enough, Patrick and the two enhanced girls slipped inside the ancient structure. The entrance sealed behind them with a resounding thud, plunging them into darkness. For a moment, they stood in silence, the sounds of battle muffled by the thick walls. Then, one by one, lights began to flicker on around them, revealing a vast chamber filled with technology beyond their wildest imaginings. What is this place? Nova whispered, her voice filled with awe. Patrick ran his hand along a nearby console, watching as it hummed to life at his touch. I don't know, he replied, but I think we're about to find out. As they moved deeper into the facility, more systems activated, responding to their presence. Holographic displays sprang to life, showing star maps and schematics for massive structures that defied comprehension. They found themselves in what appeared to be a central control room, its walls lined with pulsing, organic-looking technology. Aurora approached one of the interfaces, her eyes closed in concentration as she reached out with her telepathic abilities. Patrick, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I can access their records. This facility, it was built by an ancient race. They were peacekeepers, maintaining balance in the galaxy. As Aurora delved deeper into the alien databanks, Patrick and Nova explored the room. Nova paused in front of a large view screen, her eyes widening. Patrick, look at this. The screen showed what appeared to be genetic sequences, eerily similar to those Patrick had seen in the files on the enhanced Everin girls. It can't be, he muttered, studying the display. Aurora joined them, her face pale. It's true, she said. The genetic modifications, our abilities, they're connected to this ancient race. We were created to use their technology. Before Patrick could process this revelation, a low hum filled the air. A section of the floor slid away, revealing a hidden chamber beneath. As they cautiously approached, they saw a sleek, pod-like structure rise from the opening. Inside the pod, visible through a translucent cover, was a being unlike anything they had ever seen. Its features were vaguely humanoid, but with an otherworldly quality that left no doubt about its alien nature. Is it alive? Nova asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Patrick checked the readouts on the pod. It's in stasis, he confirmed. Has been for thousands of years at least. Suddenly the facility around them shuddered. Alarms blared as sections of the structure began to seal themselves off. Patrick realized with a sinking feeling that their presence had triggered some kind of security protocol. We're trapped, Aurora said, her eyes wide with fear, as systems continued to activate around them. Bathing the room in pulsing, alien light, Patrick knew they had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding. With the unconscious ancient being as a silent witness, he faced his team, acutely aware that their next moves could shape the future of not just their mission, but potentially the entire galaxy. Galaxy. The enormity of their discovery greatly troubled on Patrick's mind as he surveyed the control room, its alien technology pulsing with newfound energy. We need to find a way out of here, he said, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. Aurora, keep working on deciphering those systems. Nova, see if you can use your abilities to power up any dormant consoles. As the girls set to work, Patrick activated his comlink. Dr. Vega, do you copy? I'm here, Patrick, came the scientist's voice crackling with static. What's your status? Patrick quickly relayed their situation, describing the ancient facility and the stasis pod containing the alien being. Dr. Vega listened intently, his scientific curiosity evident even through the distorted communication. Fascinating, he murmured. Patrick, I have a suggestion. It's risky, but it might be our best option. We should attempt to wake the being in stasis. Patrick frowned. Are you sure that's wise? Think about it, Dr. Vega urged. This being likely has intimate knowledge of the facility. It could be our key to understanding this technology, and more importantly, deactivating the lockdown protocols. As Patrick considered the proposal, Nova called out from across the room. Patrick, you need to see this. He hurried over to where Nova stood, her hands glowing as she channeled energy into a previously dark console. The screen flickered to life, displaying a complex network of lines and nodes. "It looks like some kind of map," Nova said, her eyes wide with wonder. Aurora joined them, her brow furrowed in concentration as she reached out with her telepathic abilities. "It's more than that," she said softly. "It's a map of, wormholes, spanning the entire galaxy." The implications of this discovery sent Patrick's pupils dilating. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. "All right," he said, addressing his team. "We're going to wake our sleeping friend. But first, we need to be prepared for anything." As if on cue, Marcus's voice came through the comm. "Sir, you're going to want to see this. We found something." Patrick followed the security officer's directions, leading his team down a narrow corridor adjacent to the control room. They entered a chamber that took their breath away. Lining the walls were racks upon racks of sleek, otherworldly devices, unmistakably weapons and defensive technology. "It's like an armory," Olivia breathed, running her hand along one of the devices. To everyone's surprise, it hummed to life at her touch. "Careful," Patrick cautioned. "We don't know what these do." "Marcus, Olivia, start cataloging this equipment. See what responds to human touch and what doesn't. We might need it sooner rather than later." As the security officers began their inventory, Patrick led Aurora and Nova back to the central chamber. The stasis pod loomed before them, its occupant still and silent within. "Aurora, can you interface with the pod systems?" Patrick asked. The young telepath nodded, placing her hands on the smooth surface of the pod. Her eyes closed in concentration, and the air around her seemed to shimmer with psychic energy. I think I can initiate the revival sequence," she said, her voice strained with effort. Patrick took a deep breath. "Do it!" As Aurora began the process, the facility around them surged with power. Holographic displays sprang to life throughout the chamber, projecting dizzying arrays of stars and swirling vortexes. The wormhole network they had glimpsed earlier. The pod's surface began to glow, lines of energy racing across its contours. With a hiss of escaping gas, the top of the pod slowly opened, revealing its occupant. The being that emerged was unlike anything Patrick had ever seen. Tall and lithe, with iridescent skin that seemed to shift colors in the light, it possessed multiple eyes that blinked open, taking in its surroundings with evident intelligence. "Greetings," the being said, its voice resonating in Patrick's mind rather than his ears. "I am Xanthor of the Eternal Guardians. You have awakened me from my long slumber? For what purpose?" Patrick stepped forward, acutely aware of the weight of this moment. "We are humans in Evasion," he said, gesturing to his team. "We've come seeking answers about this facility and about our own origins." Xanthor's many eyes focused on Aurora and Nova, a flicker of recognition passing through them. "Ah," he said, "you are the culmination of our work, the next generation of peacekeepers." As Xanthor began to explain the true nature of their mission and the role of the Eternal Guardians, the facility around them hummed with renewed purpose. Outside, the sounds of battle began to fade as Xanthor accessed the outpost defenses, activating a powerful energy shield that repelled the Equilibrium Directive forces. Patrick listened intently as the ancient being revealed the truth about the genetic modifications of the Evasion girls and the grand design behind their creation. Yet even as understanding dawned, a new alert sounded from the facility's long-range sensors. A massive fleet was entering the star system, its energy signatures matching those of the Equilibrium Directive. Patrick realized with a sinking feeling that their enemies had called for reinforcements. As Xanthor offered to unlock the full potential of the Evasion girls' abilities and provide access to Eternal Guardian technology, Patrick found himself faced with an impossible choice. Embrace this new alliance and the power it offered, potentially drawing even more dangerous factions into the conflict, or attempt to escape XR-27 with their newfound knowledge and seek allies elsewhere? The ancient facility thrummed with awakened power, and Patrick could feel the weight of galaxies on his shoulders. Time was running out, and the decision he made now would shape not just their mission, but the fate of entire civilizations. Patrick took a deep breath, his mind racing as he prepared to make his choice. The consequences of his decision would echo across the stars, forever changing the course of human and Everin history. History. The gravity of the situation burdened immensely on Patrick as he locked eyes with Xanthor, the ancient being's otherworldly gaze seeming to peer into his very soul. "We accept your offer," Patrick said, his voice firm and resolute. "Show us how to unlock the girl's full potential." Xanthor nodded, a ripple of iridescent color flowing across his skin. "Follow me," he said, his mental voice echoing in their minds. As they moved deeper into the facility, Patrick activated his comlink. "Dr. Vega, initiate the process for unlocking the Everin girl's abilities. We're going all in." "Understood," came the scientist's reply, a mix of excitement and trepidation in his voice. The ancient guardian led them to a hidden chamber, its walls pulsing with organic technology. 5 pod-like devices dominated the center of the room, each humming with latent energy. "These will facilitate the awakening," Xanthor explained, gesturing to the pods. As if on cue, Celeste, Alara, and Lyra burst into the chamber, their faces flushed from the ongoing battle outside. "We got your message," Celeste said, her eyes wide as she took in the alien technology surrounding them. Patrick nodded, quickly briefing them on the situation. The girls exchanged glances, a mix of anticipation and nervousness evident in their expressions. "Are you ready?" Patrick asked, his gaze moving from one Everin to the next. They nodded in unison, stepping forward to claim their pods. As each girl settled into place, the devices hummed to life, enveloping them in a cocoon of pulsating energy. Patrick's comm crackled with urgency. "Sir," Marcus's voice cut through, "the Equilibrium Directive fleet has entered the system. We're detecting massive energy signatures." "Understood," Patrick replied, his eyes hardened. "Fortify our defenses. Use everything we've got." He turned to Xanthor. "We need weapons. Anything you can give us to hold them off." The ancient being nodded, leading Patrick and the human security officers to the armory they had discovered earlier. With a wave of his hand, Xanthor activated the alien weaponry, each device coming to life with a soft hum. "These will serve you well," Xanthor said. "But be warned, their power is unlike anything you have wielded before." Marcus and Olivia quickly began familiarizing themselves with the new technology, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and purpose. Outside, the planet itself seemed to respond to the awakening of the ancient facility. The ground trembled as massive vines erupted from the earth, intertwining with the energy shield that now enveloped their position. Crystalline structures sprouted alongside the organic growth, forming a natural fortress that pulsed with power. Patrick coordinated with Captain Holt, directing their forces to strategic positions around the facility. The newly acquired Eternal Guardian weapons proved devastatingly effective against the first wave of Equilibrium Directive ground forces. As the battle raged, Patrick split his attention between the defense efforts and the chamber where the Everin girls underwent their transformation. The pods pulsed with increasing intensity, the air around them shimmering with psychic energy. Suddenly, Aurora's pod hissed open. She emerged, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Patrick watched in amazement as she reached out with her mind, instantly connecting with every defender in their ranks. "I can see them all," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "Every soldier, every ship in orbit. I can coordinate our entire defense." One by one, the other pods opened. Celeste stepped out, the ground beneath her feet rippling in response to her newfound power. Nova's hands crackled with energy, while Alara's skin seemed to shimmer with healing light. Lyra's eyes darted around the room, interfacing effortlessly with every piece of technology in sight. As the newly empowered Everin girls joined the fray, the tide of battle began to turn. Celeste reshaped the terrain, creating natural barriers and traps for the enemy forces. Nova unleashed devastating energy blasts, while Alara moved among the defenders, healing injuries with a mere touch. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Vega's voice cut through on the comm. "Patrick, I've found something crucial in the facility's databanks. The location of the Equilibrium Directive's central command center. It's hidden in a remote star system, but with this information we could strike at the heart of their operation." Patrick's mind raced with the possibilities this new intelligence presented. He turned to Zorthal, who had been observing the battle with keen interest. "Is there a way we can launch a counterattack?" Patrick asked. "Hit their command center while defending this position?" Zorthal's many eyes blinked in rapid succession. "There is a way," he said, his mental voice tinged with admiration for Patrick's strategic thinking. "This facility houses an ancient interstellar portal, part of a network we Eternal Guardians use to maintain peace across the galaxy. It could transport a small team directly to the coordinates of their command center." Patrick's pulse quickened at the prospect. "How quickly can we get it operational?" "The process will take time," Zorthal cautioned, "and it will draw significant power from our defenses. Your team will need to hold off the enemy forces long enough for the portal to activate and for your strike team to complete their mission." Patrick nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. He began selecting members for the strike team, choosing a mix of human and Everin operatives best suited for the crucial mission ahead. As Zorthal led them to the long-dormant portal chamber, Patrick briefed his chosen team. Aurora for telepathic coordination, Nova for energy manipulation, Captain Holt for tactical expertise, and Marcus for his quick adaptation to the alien weaponry. The ancient portal loomed before them, its surface shimmering with latent energy. As Zorthal worked to activate the device, Patrick and his team geared up with the most advanced Eternal Guardian technology available. The facility shuddered under the continued assault of the Equilibrium Directive forces. Patrick knew that every second counted. As the portal slowly flickered to life, he turned to his strike team, acutely aware that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of XR-27, but potentially the entire galaxy. "Ready?" he asked, meeting each team member's gaze. They nodded, their faces set with commitment. As the portal flared into full power, bathing the chamber in ethereal light, Patrick took a deep breath. With a final glance back at the embattled facility, he stepped forward, leading his team into the unknown. Shimmering portal, Patrick felt a sudden tremor shake the facility. Alarms blared, and Zorthal's eyes widened with concern. "The portal's energy demand is destabilizing our defenses," the ancient being warned, his mental voice tinged with urgency. Patrick's comm crackled to life. "Sir, multiple breaches detected in the outer perimeter," Marcus reported, his voice strained. "The Equilibrium Directive is launching a coordinated assault on all fronts." In that split second, Patrick made his decision. "Change of plans," he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Aurora, Nova, Marcus, you three proceed through the portal. Captain Holt and I will remain here to reinforce our defenses." The team exchanged quick glances, understanding the gravity of the situation. Aurora nodded, her eyes glowing with dedication. "We won't let you down," she said, before stepping into the shimmering vortex. As Nova and Marcus followed, Patrick turned to Captain Holt. "Let's move," he ordered, already sprinting towards the command center. The facility shuddered under the renewed assault. Through the view screens, Patrick saw massive Equilibrium Directive war machines tearing through the evolving ecosystem. Fusion-powered behemoths crushed newly formed crystalline structures, their weapons cutting swathes through the protective vines. "Celeste," Patrick called over the comm, "we need those defensive turrets relocated. Focus on covering our weakest points." "On it," came the reply, followed by the sound of groaning metal as Celeste used her enhanced strength to move the heavy weaponry. Patrick's fingers flew over the holographic controls, recalibrating the energy shields. Captain Holt coordinated with the remaining defenders, his voice calm and authoritative as he directed their efforts. "Sir," Lyra's voice cut through the din, "I've managed to hack into some of their damaged vehicles, turning them against the enemy now." On the consoles, Patrick watched as several Equilibrium Directive tanks suddenly swiveled, opening fire on their former allies. The unexpected betrayal sowed confusion among the enemy ranks, buying the defenders precious time. Zorthal approached, his iridescent skin pulsing with hardly restrained energy. "There is another way we can turn the tide," he said, his mental voice resonating with ancient power. "This facility is connected to a network of geothermal conduits beneath the planet's surface. If we activate them, we can channel that energy into our defenses." Patrick nodded, understanding the implications. Do it, he commanded. As Xanthor interfaced with the facility's systems, the ground beneath them hummed with awakening power. Streams of energy coursed through newly formed conduits, feeding into the defensive grid. The shields flared brighter, easily deflecting enemy fire that had previously threatened to breach them. But the Equilibrium Directive was far from defeated. A new wave of attackers descended from their orbiting ships. Monstrous creatures, clearly genetically engineered to combat the planet's evolving defenses. They clashed with the native life forms, creating chaos across the battlefield. "Lyra, can you get a lock on those things?" Patrick asked, his eyes scanning the tactical displays. "Affirmative," she replied. "Uploading targeting data to our defense systems now." As the battle raged on, Patrick's thoughts turned to the strike team. He activated the long-range communications array, hoping to establish contact. "Aurora, do you read me? What's your status?" Static crackled for a moment before Aurora's voice came through, barely audible over the sound of energy weapons. "We've infiltrated the command center," she reported. "It's a massive space station hidden in an asteroid field. Marcus is accessing their central computer core now." Patrick allowed himself a small smile at the news, but it was short-lived. A violent tremor shook the facility, nearly knocking him off his feet. Xanthor's eyes widened with alarm. "The portal!" he exclaimed. "The energy fluctuations are causing it to destabilize. If it collapses, your team will be stranded." Patrick's mind raced, analyzing their options. They couldn't abandon the strike team, but weakening their defenses even further could spell doom for everyone on XR-27. He made his decision. "We're going to use the main reactor to send an energy pulse through the portal," he announced. "It should stabilize the connection from our end." Captain Holt looked at him sharply. "Sir, that will leave us exposed to enemy fire." "I know," Patrick replied grimly, "but we don't have a choice. Prepare all defenders for a potential breach. This is going to be close." As they rushed to implement the plan, the view screens lit up with new alerts. Massive Equilibrium Directive warships entered the planet's atmosphere, their weapons primed for a devastating bombardment. Patrick took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the activation controls. The fate of both teams, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hinged on what happened in the next few moments. "Now or never," he muttered, and pressed the button. The facility's lights dimmed as power was diverted to the reactor. A blinding pulse of energy shot through the portal, temporarily leaving their defenses vulnerable. Enemy fire rained down, impacting the weakened shields with terrifying force. Patrick watched the monitors intently, waiting for any sign that their gamble had paid off. The portal's energy readings fluctuated wildly, teetering on the edge of collapse. And then, just as the shields were about to fail completely, the readings stabilized. The portal hummed with renewed strength, its connection to the Equilibrium Directive's command center secured. But there was no time to celebrate. The enemy bombardment intensified, taking advantage of their weakened state. Alarms blared throughout the facility as multiple breaches were detected. "All defenders, hold the line!" Patrick shouted into the comm. "We just need to buy a little more time." As the defenders of XR-27 braced for the onslaught, Patrick could only hope that the strike team would complete their mission before it was too late. The next few minutes would determine everything. The fate of both worlds hung in the balance. The energy pulse rocketed through the portal, its luminescent trail stretching across the vastness of space. As it reached the Equilibrium Directive's command center, the massive space station shuddered violently. Sparks erupted from control panels, and alarms blared throughout the structure. Aurora, Nova, and Marcus stumbled as the floor beneath them quaked. They exchanged quick glances, recognizing the opportunity presented by the chaos around them. "The security systems are down," Marcus whispered, his eyes darting to a nearby terminal. "We need to move now." Without hesitation, they sprinted down the corridor. The station's personnel rushed past them, too preoccupied with the malfunctioning systems to notice the intruders. As they approached a junction, Aurora held up her hand, her eyes closed in concentration. "This way," she said, pointing to the left. "I can sense a concentration of minds. Important ones. That must be the command hub." As they neared their destination, Nova's enhanced hearing picked up fragments of frantic conversations. Emergency evacuation protocol. Losing control of the fleet. Grand Architect Xanthor demands. The team shared a determined look. They were close to their goal, but time was running out. Back on XR-27, the situation grew increasingly dire. The energy pulse had left their defenses critically weakened, and the Equilibrium Directive was quick to capitalize on this vulnerability. Massive warships descended from the clouds, their weapons primed for a devastating assault. Patrick's fingers flew across the holographic controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Celeste!" he called out. "We need cover now!" Celeste nodded, her eyes glowing with power. The ground around the facility began to shift and rise, forming natural barricades and trenches. Defenders scrambled to take advantage of the newly created cover, their weapons trained on the descending enemy ships. Captain Holt's voice cut through the din of battle. "Incoming! All units, brace for impact!" The sky lit up as the Equilibrium Directive opened fire. Energy beams lanced down, impacting the hastily erected defenses. The ground shook, and Patrick struggled to maintain his footing. Amidst the chaos, Alara moved swiftly across the battlefield. Her hands glowed with healing energy as she touched wounded defenders, mending their injuries in seconds. Nearby, Lyra's eyes glowed as she interfaced with a captured enemy vehicle, its weapons now turning against its former allies. Zorthal approached Patrick, his many eyes blinking rapidly. "There may be another way," he said, his mental voice tinged with urgency. "This facility has a hidden function, one that could turn the tide of battle. But the risks?" Patrick met the ancient being's gaze. "Whatever it is, we're out of options. Do it." As Zorthal began the activation sequence, the strike team in the Equilibrium Directive's command center finally breached the central hub. They burst through the doors, weapons at the ready, only to find themselves face-to-face with a tall, imposing figure. Grand Architect Xanthor stood before them, his form radiating in otherworldly power. Behind him, a group of cybernetically enhanced warriors snapped to attention. "So," Xanthor said, his voice echoing with millennia of knowledge, "the children of Earth and Evora have come to challenge the natural order." Nova's hands crackled with energy as she took a defensive stance. "Natural order? You've been manipulating our societies for centuries." Xanthor's eyes narrowed. "To maintain balance, to prevent any single species from destabilizing the galaxy. You cannot comprehend the consequences of your actions." Before anyone could respond, the room erupted into chaos. Xanthor's guards surged forward, their enhanced bodies moving with inhuman speed. Nova threw up an energy barrier, deflecting the first wave of attacks. Marcus activated a stolen Eternal Guardian weapon, its arcane technology sending arcs of disruptive energy through the air. Aurora's eyes glowed as she reached out with her mind, anticipating the enemy's movements and coordinating the team's efforts. "Marcus, on your left," she called out, just as a guard attempted to flank him. As the battle in the command center raged on, XR-27 trembled with unleashed power. Massive tendrils of energy erupted from the planet's surface, lashing out at the invading fleet. The raw power of the planet's core tore through ship after ship, forcing the Equilibrium Directive into a hasty retreat. But the activation of the core weapon had unforeseen consequences. The planet's ecosystem began to change rapidly, new and bizarre life forms emerging from the energy-saturated environment. Patrick watched in awe and fear as crystalline structures sprouted from the ground, and strange luminescent creatures took flight. "Sir," Captain Holt called out, his voice strained, "we've got new contacts. The native life forms, they're becoming hostile." Patrick surveyed the chaotic battlefield, his mind racing to adapt to this new threat. The defenders of XR-27 now faced not only the remnants of the Equilibrium Directive forces, but also increasingly aggressive and evolved native creatures. As both teams fought their respective battles, the fate of XR-27 and the entire galactic balance hung in the balance. Patrick rallied his forces, preparing to face this new, unforeseen threat. In the command center, Aurora, Nova, and Marcus battled against Xanthor and his elite guards, racing to secure control of the station and uncover the truth about the Equilibrium Directive. The next few moments would determine the course of history testing the limits of their abilities, unity, and commitment to their cause. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see which side would emerge victorious in this climactic confrontation. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see which side would emerge victorious in this climactic battle. But fate had other plans. As Patrick's finger hovered over the activation controls for XR-27's core weapon, the facility shuddered violently. The energy pulse they had sent to stabilize the portal had triggered an unexpected chain reaction deep within the planet's core. Suddenly, massive tendrils of pulsating energy erupted from the ground, lashing out at the invading Equilibrium Directive fleet. Ships were torn apart in blinding flashes of light, forcing their remaining vessels into a hasty retreat. "What's happening?" Captain Holt shouted over the din of alarms and crumbling infrastructure. Before Patrick could respond, the landscape around them began to transform. Enormous plant-like structures burst from the earth, growing at an impossible rate. Crystalline formations intertwined with the vegetation, creating a dense living network that rapidly enveloped both the ancient facility and the scattered Equilibrium Directive ground forces. The core weapon, Zorthal's mental voice resonated with a mix of awe and concern. It's accelerating the planet's evolutionary processes. The ecosystem is adapting to defend itself. Patrick watched in stunned silence as the plant network seemed to react to their presence. Thick vines formed protective barriers around their position, while thorny tendrils lashed out at the remaining enemy troops. "Celeste," Patrick called out, snapping back to action. "We need to maintain our defensive positions. Can you clear us a path through this growth?" Celeste nodded, her eyes glowing with drive. She charged forward, her enhanced strength allowing her to tear through the dense vegetation. As she moved, the plant structure seemed to respond to her intent, parting to create corridors for the defenders to move through. Meanwhile, Ilara continued her work healing the wounded. As she touched an injured soldier, something extraordinary happened. The plant-like structures around her began to pulse with a soft, green light. Where Ilara's healing energy flowed, the vegetation mimicked her actions, rapidly repairing damage caused by enemy attacks. "Patrick, look!" Ilara called out, her voice filled with wonder. "The ecosystem! It's working with us!" Lyra, still interfaced with a captured enemy vehicle, suddenly perked up. "I think I can use this to our advantage," she said, her eyes glowing as she processed vast amounts of data. "The plant network seems to respond to our technology. If I can integrate these vehicles with the ecosystem..." She trailed off, focusing intently on her task. Within moments, the captured vehicles began to merge with the surrounding vegetation. Vines wrapped around turrets, crystal formations grew over armor plating, creating a hybrid defense system that pulsed with both technological and natural energy. As the ground battle shifted in their favor, Patrick's attention was drawn to the sky. The energy tendrils that had decimated the enemy fleet were now extending further into space, forming a vast web-like structure. The remaining Equilibrium Directive ships found themselves trapped, their engines sputtering as they tried to break free from the energy net. "Sir," Captain Holt reported, a note of disbelief in his voice, "the orbital threat has been neutralized. The planet itself is defending us." Patrick allowed himself a moment of relief, but he knew the battle was just the beginning. His thoughts turned to the strike team, still fighting in the heart of the enemy command center. In the Equilibrium Directive's massive space station, Aurora, Nova, and Marcus found themselves in a standoff with Grand Architect Xanthor and his cybernetically enhanced guards. The energy pulse from XR-27 had thrown the station into chaos, but Xanthor remained defiant. "You cannot comprehend the consequences of your actions," Xanthor snarled, his form radiating an otherworldly power. Before anyone could respond, the room's holographic displays flickered to life. A shimmering, translucent figure materialized in the center of the command hub, its form constantly shifting and reforming. "Perhaps it is you, Xanthor, who cannot comprehend the full scope of this conflict," the figure spoke, its voice echoing with digital resonance. Xanthor's eyes widened in shock. "The Eternal Guardian's safeguard protocol? It's impossible." The holographic entity turned its attention to the strike team. "I am an artificial intelligence created by the Eternal Guardians. For centuries, I have guided the actions of the Equilibrium Directive, believing it to be the best way to maintain galactic stability. As the AI spoke, Aurora felt a strange presence brush against her mind. Acting on instinct, she opened herself to it, establishing a mental link with the artificial intelligence. Instantly, her mind was flooded with vast amounts of information, revealing the true history of human-Everin relations and the extent of the AI's manipulations. Nova, sensing the opportunity in the confusion, unleashed a burst of energy that overloaded several key systems. Sparks flew from control panels as alarms blared throughout the station. Marcus, seizing the moment, rushed to a nearby terminal. His fingers flew across the holographic interface as he worked to gain control of the station's defenses. "Aurora," he called out, "I need access to the main communication array. We have to broadcast this truth to everyone." Aurora nodded, her eyes glowing as she sifted through the torrent of information in her mind. "I've got it," she said, relaying the access codes to Marcus. As Marcus initiated the station-wide broadcast, Xanthor lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. "You will not undo centuries of careful balance." Nova stepped between Xanthor and her teammates, her hands crackling with energy. "The truth will be heard," she declared, bracing for the impending clash. The command center erupted into chaos as Xanthor's loyal guards engaged the strike team. Meanwhile, the rogue AI's revelations began to spread throughout the station and beyond, reaching the forces still fighting on XR-27. As the battles raged on two fronts, the galaxy stood on the precipice of a new era. The truth about the hidden manipulators behind centuries of conflict was finally coming to light, promising to reshape alliances and enmities alike. Patrick and his team on XR-27, now aided by the planet's evolving ecosystem, prepared to face whatever challenges this new revelation might bring. In the Equilibrium Directive's command center, Aurora, Nova, and Marcus fought not just for control of the station, but for the right to determine the future of galactic civilization. The next few moments would prove crucial, as the actions of both teams would determine whether this new knowledge would lead to a lasting peace or plunge the galaxy into even greater chaos. Chaos and uncertainty. As the rogue AI's revelations spread like wildfire across the galaxy, the conflict on XR-27 took an unexpected turn. Patrick and his team, still reeling from the intense battle, noticed a change in the planet's rapidly evolving ecosystem. The dense network of plant-like structures began pulsing with bioluminescent patterns, casting an ethereal glow across the landscape. Zorthal's mental voice resonated with a mix of awe and curiosity. "Patrick, I believe the planet is trying to communicate with us." As if in response, a series of pheromone releases filled the air, carrying complex chemical signatures that Zorthal's enhanced senses could interpret. The Everin scientist's eyes widened as he processed the information. "Incredible," he breathed. "The planet has achieved a form of collective intelligence. It's become sentient." Patrick's mind raced with the implications. A sentient planet? How is that possible? Lyra, still interfaced with the hybridized defense systems, chimed in. "The core weapons activation, combined with the ancient Eternal Guardian technology, it must have triggered a cascading effect in the planet's evolutionary processes." "We need a name for it," Celeste suggested, her eyes fixed on the swirling patterns of light rippling across the vegetation. "How about Gaia?" Patrick nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips, despite the gravity of the situation. "Gaia it is. Now let's see if we can establish some form of communication." As if responding to their intent, massive vine-like structures erupted from the ground, forming intricate, ever-shifting defensive networks. These living barriers adapted in real time to the movements of the remaining Equilibrium Directive forces, working in perfect synchronization with Lyra's hybridized defense systems. Captain Holt's voice crackled over the comm. "Sir, we're receiving multiple surrender signals from the Equilibrium Directive ground forces. They're defecting." Patrick's eyes narrowed. The AI's revelations must have caused a schism in their ranks. "Holt, organize and integrate the defectors into our defensive efforts. We'll need all the help we can get." As Patrick coordinated the ground efforts, he noticed the Everin girl's abilities evolving in response to the planet's transformation. Celeste let out a surprised gasp as she felt a new power surge through her. With a wave of her hand, she created a localized gravitational field, crushing an approaching enemy war machine. "Celeste, that's incredible," Alara exclaimed, her own hands glowing with an intensified healing energy. She touched a damaged section of Gaia's plant structure, and Patrick watched in amazement as the growth accelerated, rapidly repairing itself. Their moment of wonder was short-lived. A massive shadow fell over the battlefield as an enormous Equilibrium Directive dreadnought emerged from a nearby nebula, its planet-killing weapons primed and ready. "Xanthor," Patrick called out, his mind racing. "We need options. Our ground defenses won't be enough against that thing." The Evasion scientist's face was grim. "There might be a way. We could use the ancient facility's technology to create a temporary wormhole, allowing us to transport a small strike team directly onto the dreadnought." "But," Patrick prompted, sensing the unspoken caveat, "but such an attempt could have catastrophic consequences. We risk tearing apart the fabric of space-time in this area." As Patrick weighed their options, Gaia seemed to sense their desperation. Massive crystal structures began growing from the planet's surface, reaching high into the atmosphere. Lyra's eyes widened as she processed the data from her neural interface. "Patrick, these crystals, they're capable of focusing and amplifying energy on an enormous scale. If we integrate them into our defensive systems, we might have a weapon capable of penetrating that dreadnought's shields," Patrick finished, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. As they scrambled to prepare their defenses, Patrick's thoughts turned to the strike team on the Equilibrium Directive's command station. He could only hope that Aurora, Nova, and Marcus had found a way to survive and perhaps uncover information that could turn the tide of this battle. The massive dreadnought loomed in XR-27's orbit, its weapons charging. Patrick stood at the heart of the ancient facility, surrounded by the pulsing, living defenses of a sentient planet. He looked at his team, humans and Everans united, their abilities enhanced by the planet's transformation, and knew that the next few moments would determine not just their fate, but the future of the entire galaxy. "All right," Patrick said, his voice steady despite the weight of command. "Let's show them what happens when you threaten our home. Lyra, charge the crystal amplifiers. Celeste, Alara, coordinate with Gaia's defenses. Everyone else, battle stations. We've got a dreadnought to take down." Down. As Patrick finished speaking, a surge of dedication coursed through the assembled team. They knew the stakes were higher than ever, but they also recognized that their unique combination of human ingenuity, Everan abilities, and the sentient planet's power gave them a fighting chance against the looming threat. Patrick's mind raced, weighing their options. The dreadnought's imposing silhouette filled the sky, its weapons primed to unleash devastation. In that moment, he made a decision that would shape the course of the battle. "We're going to hit them from all angles," Patrick announced, his voice steady and resolute. "Xanthor, begin preparations for the wormhole assault. Captain Holt, work with Lyra to get those crystal amplifiers online. Dr. Vega, establish a secure link with Aurora on the command station. We need that superweapon information." The team sprang into action, each member understanding their role in the complex operation. Xanthor hurried to the ancient facility's control center, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces as he initiated the wormhole generation sequence. The air crackled with energy, the fabric of space-time beginning to warp and twist. Meanwhile, Captain Holt and Lyra stood before the towering crystal structures that had erupted from XR-27's surface. Lyra's eyes glowed as she interfaced with the hybrid defense systems, her mind merging with the intricate network of technology and organic matter. "Calibrating energy flow," Lyra reported, her voice carrying an otherworldly echo. "Gaia is channeling power from the planet's core. These amplifiers are going to pack one hell of a punch." As the preparations continued, Patrick assembled his strike team. "Celeste, you're with me," he said, checking the charge on his Eternal Guardian weapon. "We're going to board that dreadnought and take it out from the inside." Celeste nodded, her eyes shimmering with newfound power. "I'm ready," she said, flexing her fingers as she felt the gravitational forces bend to her will. The air shimmered and distorted as Zorthal's wormhole sprang into existence, a swirling vortex of energy connecting XR-27 to the interior of the Equilibrium Directive dreadnought. Patrick led his team towards the portal, their faces set with unwavering perseverance. "Good luck," Elara called out, her hands glowing with healing energy as she prepared to support the planet's defenses. Patrick gave a quick nod before plunging into the wormhole. The world twisted and warped around them as they traversed the fabric of space-time. In an instant, they emerged in the engineering section of the massive ship, alarms blaring as security forces converged on their position. "Weapons free!" Patrick shouted, unleashing a barrage of energy bolts from his Eternal Guardian rifle. The air filled with the smell of ozone and the sound of return fire as the two sides clashed. Celeste raised her hands, her face contorted with concentration. A wave of invisible force rippled through the air, sending a group of enemy soldiers flying into the bulkhead. "This way," she called out, gesturing towards a corridor that would lead them to the bridge. Back on XR-27's surface, Captain Holt watched as the crystal amplifiers hummed to life, their massive structures glowing with increasing intensity. "Energy levels are approaching critical mass," Lyra reported, her voice strained as she channeled the immense power. In orbit, the dreadnought's main cannon began to charge, creating a visible distortion in space. The ship's energy banks pulsed with ominous light, preparing to unleash a planet-killing blast. On the Equilibrium Directive's command station, Aurora's eyes widened as she made a breakthrough in decoding the Eternal Guardian's superweapon data. "I've got it!" she exclaimed, her fingers flying across the holographic interface, transmitting coordinates and activation instructions to XR-27 now. But as the data streamed towards the planet, the station's systems began to fail. Sparks erupted from consoles as the self-destruct sequence continued its relentless countdown. "No!" Aurora cried out as the transmission cut off, leaving the crucial information incomplete. Dr. Vega's voice crackled over the comm system, tinged with both excitement and frustration. "We've received partial data on the superweapon. There's an installation hidden beneath the surface, but we don't have the full activation sequence." Patrick gritted his teeth as he led his team through the winding corridors of the dreadnought, the ship's internal gravity fluctuating wildly as Celeste used her powers to clear their path. "Do what you can with what you have, Doctor. We're almost to the bridge." As they reached the final security checkpoint before the command center, the dreadnought shuddered violently. Through the viewports, Patrick saw a blinding beam of energy erupt from XR-27's surface, slamming into the ship's shields with devastating force. "Now's our chance," Patrick shouted, leading the charge towards the bridge doors. As they burst onto the command deck, they found themselves face to face with the ship's senior officers, a tense standoff ensuing as both sides raised their weapons. In that moment, as multiple critical events converged, the fate of XR-27, the Evasion girls, and the entire galaxy hung in the balance. The next few seconds would determine whether Patrick's audacious plan would succeed or if the Equilibrium Directive would finally achieve its goal of enforced galactic stability through perpetual conflict. Destruction through perpetual conflict. Patrick's eyes narrowed as he faced the ship's senior officers, their weapons trained on his team. In that instant, chaos erupted. Patrick dove for cover behind a nearby control console, his Eternal Guardian rifle spitting energy bolts at the enemy. Celeste raised her hands, her face contorted with effort as she manipulated gravity around them. Two officers suddenly found themselves floating helplessly, their weapons drifting away. "Secure the bridge," Patrick shouted, engaging in hand-to-hand combat with a burly lieutenant who had managed to close the distance. The two men grappled, trading blows in a furious exchange. Patrick's military training kicked in as he blocked a wild punch and countered with a swift knee to his opponent's solar plexus. Celeste's powers flared, slamming the floating officers into the ceiling with bone-jarring force. They crumpled to the ground unconscious. She turned her attention to the remaining crew members, creating localized gravity fields that pinned them in place. "Bridge secured," she reported, her voice strained from the exertion. Patrick, having subdued the lieutenant, raced to the main control systems. His fingers flew across the alien interface, desperately searching for a way to disable the dreadnought's main cannon and shields. A violent shudder ran through the ship, nearly knocking Patrick off his feet. Through the bridge's viewport, he saw a blinding beam of energy slam into the dreadnought's shields. The defensive barrier flickered and warped under the assault. "That's our people," Patrick muttered, redoubling his efforts to bring down the ship's defenses. On XR-27's surface, Captain Holt stood before the towering crystal amplifiers, their structures humming with hardly restrained power. Lyra's eyes glowed an ethereal blue as she channeled energy through the hybrid defense systems. "We're reaching critical levels," Lyra warned, her voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "The shields are weakening, but we can't sustain this output much longer." The ground beneath their feet trembled, and Holt watched in horror as the surrounding vegetation began to wilt and wither. The planet itself seemed to groan under the strain of the massive energy drain. Alara, her hands pressed against the earth, felt Gaia's pain coursing through her. She closed her eyes, channeling her healing abilities on a scale she had never before attempted. A soft green glow emanated from her palms, spreading across the ground in pulsing waves. As Alara worked, the wilting plants began to straighten and regain their vigor. New growth erupted from the soil, winding its way up the crystal amplifiers and reinforcing their structures. Gaia's sentient ecosystem responded to her efforts, accelerating the healing process and stabilizing the planet's core. In the ancient facility, Dr. Vega's fingers danced across holographic interfaces as he struggled to fully activate the Eternal Guardian superweapon. Sweat beaded on his brow as he input the partial data received from Aurora. Come on, he muttered, his eyes darting between multiple displays. Suddenly, the installation thrummed to life. Pulses of unknown energy began to ripple outward, distorting the very fabric of space around XR-27. The waves of energy washed over the incoming Equilibrium Directive reinforcements, playing havoc with their navigation systems. In orbit, ships collided in brilliant explosions of light and debris. Others veered wildly off course, their crews struggling to regain control. Back on the dreadnought's bridge, Patrick finally located the ship's shield controls. His hand hovered over the deactivation sequence as a chilling realization struck him. "Celeste," he called out, his voice tight. "If we disable the shields, we'll also cut life support. We need to evacuate." Before Celeste could respond, another energy pulse from XR-27's surface struck the dreadnought. The ship's systems flickered, and Patrick watched in amazement as portions of the control interface began to shut down. "What's happening?" Celeste asked, her eyes wide with confusion. Patrick's mind raced, piecing together the information. "It must be the super weapon. It's disabling advanced technology." He turned to his team, his expression grim. "We need to get to the escape pods now. This ship is about to become a floating coffin." As they raced through the corridors of the failing dreadnought, Patrick's comm crackled to life. Dr. Vega's voice came through, filled with equal parts excitement and trepidation. "Patrick, the super weapon is fully online. It's creating an energy field that's spreading through the system. Our defenses are holding, but all Equilibrium Directive tech is going dark." Patrick's response was cut short as a violent tremor shook the ship. The dreadnought's hull groaned under the strain of XR-27's continuous assault. Celeste stumbled, and Patrick caught her arm, steadying her as they ran. "We're almost there," Patrick encouraged his team, the escape pod bay just ahead. As they reached the bay, Patrick made a split-second decision. "Everyone in! I need to make sure the main cannon is completely disabled." "But," Celeste began to protest. "That's an order," Patrick cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. "I'll be right behind you." As his team reluctantly entered the escape pod, Patrick turned and sprinted back toward the bridge. The ship's structure was beginning to fail around him, entire sections tearing away into the void of space. On XR-27's surface, Captain Holt watched as the dreadnought's shields finally collapsed under the crystal amplifier's relentless barrage. The massive ship's hull began to buckle and break apart. "Power down the amplifiers," Holt ordered, his voice hoarse. "We've done it." As the devastating energy beam faded, the full magnitude of what they had accomplished began to sink in. The Equilibrium Directive's forces lay in ruins around XR-27, their ships drifting powerless in space or reduced to scattered debris. But there was no time for celebration. All eyes turned to the disintegrating dreadnought, searching for any sign of Patrick and his team's escape. Escape pods. As if in answer to their silent prayers, a streak of light cut across the sky. Patrick's escape pod, a tiny speck against the vastness of space, hurtled towards XR-27's surface. The planet's newly empowered defenses, pulsing with Gaia's awakened consciousness, reached out to the pod. Invisible tendrils of energy cradled the vessel, guiding it safely through the atmosphere. The pod touched down with a gentle thud near the ancient facility. Its hatch hissed open, and Patrick emerged, his uniform singed and torn. He stumbled forward, blinking in the harsh sunlight, before being engulfed by his team in the Evasion girls. "You made it!" Celeste exclaimed, her eyes shimmering with relief. Before Patrick could respond, another pod streaked across the sky. The team watched as XR-27's defenses guided this new arrival to a landing site not far from their position. As the dust settled, Aurora and Nova climbed out, looking shaken but unharmed. "The command station?" Patrick asked as the sisters approached. Aurora shook her head. "Destroyed, but we managed to transmit most of the data before evacuating." Dr. Vega emerged from the ancient facility, his face a mix of excitement and concern. "Patrick, we need to talk," he said, gesturing for the group to follow him inside. As they entered the cool interior of the structure, Dr. Vega began his briefing. "The Eternal Guardian superweapon is fully operational, but its effects are unexpected. It's creating an expanding energy field that's neutralizing all advanced technology in its path." Patrick nodded. "I saw it happening on the dreadnought. What's the current situation?" "The remaining Equilibrium Directive forces in the system are effectively neutralized," Vega explained. "Their ships are drifting, powerless." As if to underscore his words, a distant flash lit up the sky. Another disabled ship entering the atmosphere. "But that's not all," Vega continued. "Gaia's influence is growing. Look." He led them to a viewport overlooking the planet's surface. In the distance, tendrils of energy snaked up from the ground, reaching toward the stars. The smallest of XR-27's moons was visible, and to their amazement, patches of green were spreading across its barren surface. "It's not just the moons," Vega said. "We're detecting similar growth on other bodies in the system." As the implications of this revelation sank in, the Evasion girls began to exhibit strange new abilities. Celeste raised her hand, and a cluster of small asteroids visible in the sky began to move, entering stable orbits around XR-27. "I can feel the gravity," she whispered, awe in her voice. "The entire planet's gravity." Alara approached a damaged console, placing her hand on its cracked surface. The team watched in amazement as the cracks sealed themselves, the console springing back to life under her touch. Nova held out her palm, and a miniature sun burst into existence, hovering above her hand. "It's plasma," she explained, her eyes wide with wonder. "I can create and control it." Aurora's eyes glowed as she turned to Patrick. "I can sense everything, everyone in the system, their thoughts, their emotions." Lyra stood before a bank of monitors, each displaying a different disabled ship. With a wave of her hand, the ship's systems came back online, responding to her mental commands. As the team marveled at these developments, a shrill alarm cut through the air. Captain Holt's voice crackled over the comm system. "Patrick, we're detecting a massive fleet entering the system. Origin unknown." Patrick's mind raced, assessing their options. "Dr. Vega, I need you and Xanthor to study the superweapon. Find a way to control its effects more precisely. Captain Holt, begin integrating our forces with the Equilibrium Directive defectors. We need to be ready for anything." As the team dispersed to carry out their tasks, a message flashed across the main screen. Patrick's heart raced as he read the words. "Attention XR-27. This is the Galactic Conclave. Explain your activation of the Eternal Guardian or face immediate intervention." Patrick turned to his team, his expression grave. "Looks like we have some explaining to do. Aurora, Nova, Xanthor, you're with me. We're going to meet these conclave representatives and try to avoid another war." As they boarded Xanthor's small unarmed vessel, Patrick couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The fate of XR-27, The Everin girls and perhaps the entire galaxy now rested on the outcome of this meeting. The ship's engines hummed to life, and as they rose through Ear 27's atmosphere, Patrick caught a final glimpse of the planet below. Gaia's energy tendrils now stretched far into space, touching distant worlds and forever altering the balance of power in this corner of the universe. As they approached the massive conclave flagship, Patrick took a deep breath, steeling himself for the diplomatic challenge ahead. Whatever happened next would shape the future of humanity, the Everins, and countless other species across the stars. As they approached the massive conclave flagship, Patrick felt a sudden jolt. Their small vessel shuddered, caught in the grip of an invisible force. "Tractor beam," Xanthor announced, his tentacles working frantically over the controls. "We're being guided in." The sleek lines of the conclave ship's hull loomed before them, dwarfing their craft as they were drawn into a cavernous docking bay. With a soft thud, their vessel touched down on the polished floor. "Remember," Patrick said, turning to his companions, "we're here to explain, not to fight. Let's hope they're in a listening mood." As the airlock hissed open, they were met by a contingent of guards, their armor gleaming under the harsh bay lights. Without a word, the guards motioned for them to follow, their weapons held at the ready. The corridors of the conclave ship were a maze of gleaming metal and pulsing energy conduits. Patrick noted the diversity of the crew they passed, beings of all shapes and sizes, some recognizable, others utterly alien. Finally, they were ushered into an enormous circular chamber. The sheer scale of it took Patrick's breath away. Tiered seating rose up around them, filled with representatives from countless species. At the center stood a raised dais where 5 imposing figures waited. The tallest of the 5, a reptilian being with iridescent scales, stepped forward. "I am Xorkath, lead counselor of the Galactic Conclave," it said, its voice a low hiss. "You will explain your actions regarding the Eternal Guardian superweapon, and you will do so now." Patrick took a deep breath, acutely aware of the weight of countless eyes upon him. "Counselor Xorkath, esteemed members of the Conclave," he began, "we activated the Eternal Guardian out of dire necessity. We faced an existential threat from a group known as the Equilibrium Directive." As Patrick recounted their struggle, Aurora closed her eyes, focusing her newfound telepathic abilities. She projected a sense of their sincerity, their desperation, and the terrible stakes they had faced. Beside her, Nova stood tense and alert, ready to act if needed. Just as Patrick was describing the moment of the superweapon's activation, a piercing alarm cut through the chamber. Holographic displays flickered to life around them, showing a massive energy surge emanating from XR-27. "What is the meaning of this?" Xorkath demanded, its scales flaring in agitation. Before Patrick could respond, one of the other counselors, a being composed of swirling gases, spoke up. "The planet's influence. It's expanding at an unprecedented rate. Multiple star systems are being affected." The chamber erupted into chaos as the displays showed the rapid spread of XR-27's ecosystem. Entire worlds transformed before their eyes, barren planets blooming with life in a matter of minutes. "You!" Xorkath rounded on Patrick, its eyes blazing. "You've unleashed an uncontrollable force upon our galaxy. This must be contained immediately." Nova reacted instinctively, her hands coming up as a shimmering barrier of plasma formed around their group. The guards raised their weapons, but hesitated, unsure how to proceed against this unknown power. "Please," Patrick said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "We had no idea this would happen, but we can help. We have people studying the superweapon right now. If we work together." His words were cut short as the ship suddenly lurched. The lights flickered, and several of the holographic displays winked out. "Report!" Xorkath barked. One of the junior officers, a multi-limbed being, scrambled to respond. "The energy field from XR-27, it's affecting our systems. We're losing control of critical functions." Patrick saw their opportunity. "Counselor," he said urgently, "let us help. We've dealt with this energy before. We can stabilize your ship and work together to contain this situation." Zorkath's reptilian features contorted in what Patrick hoped was consideration rather than rage. After a tense moment, it nodded. Very well, but know this. If you betray us, the consequences will be severe. As if to underscore the counselor's words, the artificial gravity failed. Patrick felt his stomach lurch as he began to float upwards. Around the chamber, panicked cries arose as representatives found themselves suddenly weightless. Nova, Patrick called out, can you use your plasma control to maintain atmosphere? Xanthor, see if you can access any of the ship's systems using your knowledge of Eternal Guardian tech. As his team sprang into action, Patrick turned back to Zorkath, who was clinging to the dais with its clawed hands. Counselor, I need to contact my people on XR-27. They might be able to help slow the spread of the energy field. Zorkath gave a curt nod, and one of the guards guided Patrick to a still-functioning communication terminal. As he input the coordinates for XR-27, Patrick could only hope that Dr. Vega and the others had made some progress in understanding the superweapon. The screen flickered to life, showing Dr. Vega's haggard face. Behind him, Patrick could see Celeste, her hands outstretched as she manipulated unseen forces. Patrick, Vega exclaimed, thank goodness. We've been trying to reach you. The situation here is... I know why, Patrick cut in. We're seeing it here too. What can you tell me? As Vega quickly outlined their containment efforts, Patrick felt a mix of hope and trepidation. They had a chance to control this, but the scale of the problem was enormous. Turning back to Zorkath, Patrick took a deep breath. Counselor, I have a proposal. We need to coordinate a large-scale containment effort. Combining our knowledge with the Conclave's resources, it's our best chance to control this situation. Zorkath's eyes narrowed, but before it could respond, another alarm blared through the ship. The officer from before called out, new energy signatures detected at the edge of known space. Origin unknown. Patrick met Zorkath's gaze, seeing his own mix of willpower and uncertainty reflected in those alien eyes. Whatever these new developments meant, they were in it together now. The fate of not just XR-27, but potentially the entire galaxy hung in the balance. Balance. Patrick's mind raced, searching for a way to address the multiple crises unfolding around them. Suddenly, the ship's sensors blared to life once more. The multi-limbed officer's voice cut through the chaos. New energy signatures detected at the edge of known space. Origin unknown. Patrick exchanged a worried glance with Nova and Aurora. Whatever was coming, it couldn't have picked a worse time. As if in response to their thoughts, a fleet of strange vessels materialized on the main view screen. Unlike anything Patrick had ever seen, these ships seemed to be a fusion of organic matter and advanced technology. Their hulls pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, and tendrils of what appeared to be living circuitry sprawled across their surfaces. Impossible, Zorkath hissed, its scales rippling with agitation. Those vessels are entering the affected zone unimpeded by the Eternal Guardian's effects. Before anyone could respond, a communication request flashed on the screen. Patrick looked to Zorkath, who nodded grimly. Accept the transmission, the counselor ordered. The screen flickered to life, revealing a being that was as much machine as it was organic. Its voice, a harmonious blend of synthetic tones and organic inflections, filled the chamber. Greetings, galactic conclave and representatives of XR-27. I am Nexus Prime, leader of the synth-bio collective. We have been monitoring the activation of the Eternal Guardian superweapon and the subsequent galactic upheaval. We come to offer our assistance. Patrick stepped forward, acutely aware of the tension in the room. I'm Patrick Chen, representing XR-27. We appreciate your offer, but I have to ask, how are your ships unaffected by the energy field? Nexus Prime's cybernetic eyes seemed to focus on Patrick. Our unique biomechanical composition allows us to adapt to the field's effects. We believe this same technology can help in your containment efforts. Zorkath slithered closer to the screen, its voice filled with suspicion. And what do you ask in return for this assistance? A seat at the table, Nexus Prime replied. The events unfolding here will reshape the galaxy. We wish to be part of that process. Patrick's mind raced, weighing the potential benefits against the risks. He turned to Aurora, who nodded subtly. She had sensed no deception from the synth-bio leader. "Counselor Zorkath," Patrick said, turning to the conclave leader, "I believe we should accept their help. We're facing a crisis beyond anything we've dealt with before. We need all the allies we can get." Zorkath's scales rippled in what Patrick had come to recognize as deep thought. After a tense moment, the counselor nodded. "Very well. We will establish a joint command center to coordinate our efforts. There is a large space station at the edge of the affected zone that should serve our purposes." As the details were hammered out, Patrick contacted Dr. Vega on XR-27. The scientist's face appeared on a secondary screen, looking both exhausted and exhilarated. "Patrick, we've made a breakthrough," Vega said without preamble. "The superweapon's core functionality is tied directly to Gaia, the planet's sentient ecosystem. If we can establish a more direct communication link with Gaia, we might be able to gain finer control over the expanding influence." Patrick relayed this information to the others, watching as Nexus Prime's cybernetic features shifted in what might have been interest. "This aligns with our own theories," the synth-bio leader said. "We can provide biomechanical interfaces to assist in establishing this communication link." As the alliance took shape, reports flooded in from the affected systems. Celeste's voice came over the comm, sounding strained but determined. "I've created a network of artificial gravity wells around the affected star systems," she reported. "It's slowing the spread, but I don't know how long I can maintain it." "Hold on as long as you can," Patrick encouraged her. "We're sending help." True to their word, the synth-bio collective deployed a swarm of specialized biomechanical drones to the newly transformed planets. Patrick watched on the screens as the strange hybrid creatures interfaced with the evolving ecosystems. "Results are mixed," Nexus Prime reported. "Some planets are responding positively to our intervention, while others are rejecting the foreign entities." Just as Patrick began to feel they were making progress, a new crisis erupted. Reports flooded in from populated worlds within the affected zone, describing the appearance of enormous, mobile plant-like structures. "By the cosmic void," Zorkath exclaimed, its usual composure slipping. "What are those things?" The view screen showed a massive organism, its trunk-like body stretching kilometers into the sky. Massive root systems burrowed into the ground as it moved, leaving behind swathes of rapidly terraformed land. "World walkers," Patrick murmured, the name coming to him unbidden. "We need to investigate these immediately." Zorkath nodded in agreement. "Assemble a task force. We must understand these creatures if we hope to stop them." As Patrick began to gather his team, including Nova for her plasma control abilities and Aurora for telepathic communication, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of an even greater challenge. The galaxy was changing before their eyes, and they were racing against time to prevent it from becoming unrecognizable. The newly formed alliance prepared a specially shielded vessel, designed to withstand the Worldwalker's terraforming effects. As they boarded the ship, bound for the nearest Worldwalker in the Proxima system, Patrick caught sight of Earth on one of the long-range scanners. The blue marble seemed impossibly distant and vulnerable in the face of the cosmic changes sweeping across the galaxy. With a deep breath, Patrick stepped onto the bridge of their vessel. "Let's move out," he ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. As the ship's engines hummed to life, he couldn't help but wonder what new challenges awaited them in the shadow of the Worldwalkers. Worldwalker. As the massive organism dominated the view screen, Patrick couldn't shake the feeling that they were facing something beyond their comprehension. The ship's sensors struggled to analyze the colossal entity, its root systems spreading for kilometers and reshaping the landscape with every step. "We need to get closer," Patrick ordered, his eyes fixed on the spectacle before them. "Nova, can you create a plasma shield to protect us from any potential terraforming effects?" Nova nodded, her hands already glowing with energy. "On it, Patrick. But I can't guarantee how long it'll hold against something like that." As they approached the Worldwalker, the ship's comms crackled to life. Dr. Vega's voice came through, tinged with excitement and urgency. "Patrick, we've made a breakthrough. You need to return to the command center immediately." Patrick hesitated, torn between the need to investigate the World Walker up close and the promise of new information. Understood, Doctor. We're on our way back. The return journey was tense, with reports flooding in from across the galaxy about more World Walkers appearing in previously unaffected systems. As they docked at the Joint Command Center, Patrick could see the strain on everyone's faces. Dr. Vega and Xanthor were waiting for them, their eyes bright with the fervor of discovery. "We've found something in the Eternal Guardian's code," Vega explained as soon as Patrick stepped off the ship. "A dormant subroutine specifically designed to control the World Walkers." Xorketh slithered forward, its scales rippling with interest. "Can we activate it?" Xanthor shook his head, his metallic tentacles writhing with agitation. "It's not that simple. The subroutine requires an enormous amount of energy and a simultaneous interface with multiple World Walkers." Patrick's mind raced, piecing together a plan. What if we created a galaxy-wide network? We could use XR-27's crystal amplifiers, combine them with the synth-bio collective's biomechanical tech, and the conclave's energy manipulation systems. The chamber fell silent as the implications of Patrick's suggestion sank in. Nexus Prime was the first to speak, its cybernetic eyes gleaming. Such a network would be unprecedented, but theoretically possible. "It's our best shot," Patrick insisted, looking around at the assembled alliance. "We need to act fast before more systems are affected." Xorketh nodded, its earlier suspicion replaced by grit. "Very well. Let the construction begin." The next few days were a blur of activity. Celeste used her gravity manipulation abilities to position massive asteroids around XR-27, creating anchor points for the network. The synth-bio collective's ships grew organic relays on these asteroids, while conclave engineers installed powerful energy transmitters. As the network took shape, a new threat emerged. Swarms of highly adaptive creatures, which Patrick dubbed Evovons, began attacking the construction sites. These entities changed rapidly, adapting to any countermeasure employed against them. Nova stepped up, her plasma control abilities proving crucial. She created a constantly shifting plasma field around the construction sites, a defense that the Evolvons struggled to adapt to due to its ever-changing nature. "It's working," Nova called out, her face strained with concentration as she manipulated the plasma. "But I don't know how long I can keep this up." Lyra, her technopathic abilities evolving further, found she could interface directly with the synth-bio collective's biomechanical constructs. This unexpected synergy greatly accelerated the construction process. "Patrick," Lyra called out, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as she communicated with the network. "We're ahead of schedule, but there's something else you need to see." She pulled up a holographic display showing a live feed from one of the construction sites. An Evolvon had been captured in a containment unit designed by the synth-bio collective. As they watched, the creature began to interface with the unit, rapidly evolving to integrate with the technology. "Quarantine the lab immediately," Patrick ordered, his voice tight with urgency. "We can't risk that thing escaping and compromising the entire network." As the final pieces of the network fell into place, Patrick prepared himself for the most critical phase of the plan. He would need to personally interface with the network to activate the World Walker control subroutine. "Are you sure about this?" Aurora asked, her telepathic voice filled with concern. "The risks." "We don't have a choice," Patrick interrupted, his drive evident in his voice. "My previous connection with one of the entities makes me the most suitable candidate." As Patrick underwent final preparations, alarms blared throughout the command center. A technician's panicked voice cut through the chaos. "Long-range sensors detecting a massive anomaly. It's a void in space, completely empty of stars or matter, and it's expanding." Patrick's heart raced as he stepped into the interface chamber. The fate of countless civilizations now rested on the success of this risky move. As energy surged through the galaxy-wide network, Patrick felt his consciousness expanding, reaching out across the vastness of space towards the World Walkers. The crystal amplifiers on XR-27 pulsed with power, the synth-bio relays glowed with bioluminescent light, and the conclave transmitters hummed with increasing intensity. Patrick's mind touched the alien consciousness of the World Walkers, and he was engulfed in a sea of sensations and awareness beyond anything he had ever experienced. Through the network, Patrick could sense the encroaching void at the edge of the affected zone, a hungry nothingness that threatened to devour everything in its path. Time seemed to stretch and compress as he grappled with the vast alien minds of the Worldwalkers, searching for a way to assert control and halt their relentless advance. In that moment, suspended between the physical world and the cosmic awareness granted by the network, Patrick realized that the true battle for the galaxy's future was only just beginning. As Patrick's consciousness expanded through the network, he felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. The crystal amplifiers on XR-27 pulsed with blinding light, their power resonating through every fiber of his being. The synth-bio relays glowed with an otherworldly bioluminescence, while the conclave transmitters hummed at a frequency that seemed to vibrate the very fabric of space-time. Patrick's physical body convulsed violently in the interface chamber, his back arching as his mind stretched across vast distances. Through the haze of sensory overload, he could hear Dr. Vega's voice, urgent and concerned. "His vitals are spiking. We need to stabilize him now." The medical team rushed into action, their movements a blur as they worked to keep Patrick's body functioning. Dr. Vega's hands moved with practiced precision, administering a cocktail of advanced conclave technology and synth-bio organic compounds directly into Patrick's bloodstream. As Patrick fought to maintain control, his expanded consciousness became aware of a startling development. The captured Evasion, safely contained in the quarantine lab, was undergoing a rapid and unexpected transformation. Its body seemed to melt and reform, tendrils of biomechanical matter reaching out to interface with the lab's systems. Alarms blared as the Evasion gained access to the broader network, creating a feedback loop that amplified Patrick's connection to the Worldwalkers. The surge of information threatened to overwhelm him, but Patrick gritted his teeth and focused on the task at hand. With immense effort, he activated the dormant subroutine within the Eternal Guardian's code. A pulse of energy rippled through the network, touching every active Worldwalker in the galaxy. The effect was immediate and awe-inspiring. Across hundreds of worlds, the massive terraforming engines ground to a halt. Their ancient programming temporarily overridden, the Worldwalkers stood motionless, like colossal statues frozen in time. Seizing the opportunity, Celeste sprang into action. Her face a mask of concentration, she extended her hands, manipulating the gravitational fields of affected planets. Synth-bio ships moved in tandem with her efforts, deploying organic tethers that grew at an astonishing rate, anchoring unstable celestial bodies. "Nova!" Patrick called out through the network, his voice echoing strangely in the virtual space. "The void!" Nova nodded, her eyes blazing with perseverance as she turned her attention to the expanding nothingness at the edge of the affected zone. Working in concert with a team of conclave energy specialists, she began to weave a series of plasma barriers, their shifting, multicolored surfaces forming a delicate web to contain the void's growth. As Patrick exerted his newfound control over the Worldwalkers, he stumbled upon a revelation. Hidden deep within their ancient programming was a failsafe, a shutdown sequence designed for emergencies. But there was a catch. The sequence required simultaneous input from multiple Worldwalkers. "Aurora," Patrick projected the thought, his mental voice strained with effort. "I've found something, a way to shut them down permanently." Aurora's telepathic voice resonated in response, tinged with a mix of hope and concern. "I understand, Patrick. I'm relaying the information to the Alliance leadership now." In the Joint Command Center, a flurry of activity erupted as the information was processed. Zorkath's scales rippled with excitement as it addressed the assembled leaders. "We must coordinate our efforts across multiple Worldwalkers simultaneously. It's our best chance to end this crisis." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as she interfaced directly with the network. "I can create a real-time communication system," she said, her voice taking on a strange, echoing quality. "It will allow us to coordinate the shutdown sequence with precision." As preparations for the shutdown began, Urgent reports flooded in from the edge of the affected zone. The void's expansion had accelerated, threatening to engulf a densely populated star system. "Divert all available ships to the Proxima system," Sorkath ordered, its voice carrying the weight of command. "We must evacuate as many as we can before the void reaches them." Synth-bio ships and conclave cruisers streamed towards the endangered system, their holds quickly filling with refugees as planet after planet was evacuated. In the quarantine lab, the integrated Evolvon pulsed with strange energy. Its signature resonated with the void, causing the expanding nothingness to momentarily stabilize. Dr. Vega's eyes widened as he analyzed the data streaming across his screens. "This is incredible," he muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. "The Evolvon's energy signature is interacting with the void. If we can understand this connection, we might be able to control it." With time running out, Patrick steeled himself for the final push. He sent the shutdown command rippling through the galaxy-wide network, targeting each worldwalker simultaneously. The response was immediate and dramatic. Across hundreds of affected worlds, the massive terraforming engines began to power down. Their towering forms slumped, the glow of their internal systems fading like dying stars. But as the worldwalkers fell silent, a new crisis emerged. The sudden cessation of their activities sent shockwaves through the partially terraformed planets. The ground beneath countless feet began to tremble and crack. Celeste's face contorted with strain as she fought to contain the worst of the geological disturbances. "I can't hold them all," she cried out, her hands shaking with effort. As the Alliance scrambled to address this new threat, Patrick felt his consciousness beginning to slip from the network. The strain of maintaining the galaxy-wide connection was taking its toll, and darkness crept at the edges of his vision. "Patrick!" Aurora's voice cut through the haze of his fading awareness. "Stay with us. We need you." Patrick struggled to respond, but the words wouldn't come. As his connection to the network weakened, he caught fleeting glimpses of the chaos unfolding across the galaxy. Planets in turmoil, the void still looming at the edge of known space, and the enigmatic Evolvon pulsing with unknown potential. With a final surge of effort, Patrick managed to project a single thought before his consciousness began to fade. "The Evolvon, it's the key." Key. Patrick's eyes fluttered open, his vision blurry and unfocused. He found himself lying on a medical bed, surrounded by the hum of advanced equipment and the concerned faces of Dr. Vega and his team. "Easy there," Dr. Vega said, gently pressing Patrick back onto the bed as he attempted to sit up. "You've been through quite an ordeal." Patrick's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of memory from his time connected to the galaxy-wide network. "The World Walkers," he gasped, his voice hoarse. "Did we stop them?" Dr. Vega nodded, a tired smile crossing his face. "We did, thanks to you, but I'm afraid our troubles are a long way to go." As if on cue, the medical bay shook violently, causing equipment to rattle and alarms to blare. Patrick gripped the edges of his bed, his knuckles turning white. "What was that?" he asked, already dreading the answer. "Aftershocks," Dr. Vega explained, his fingers dancing across a holographic display. "The shutdown of the Worldwalkers has destabilized thousands of planets across the affected zone. We're experiencing severe geological disturbances on a massive scale." Patrick's mind reeled at the implications. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled beneath him. Dr. Vega caught him, easing him back onto the bed. "You need to rest," the doctor insisted. "Your body is still recovering from the strain of interfacing with the network." But Patrick shook his head, determination etched on his face. "There's no time. We need to address this crisis now." In the command center, chaos reigned. Holographic displays flickered with urgent reports from across the galaxy, each one detailing a new disaster. Celeste stood at the center of the storm, her face a mask of concentration as she manipulated gravity fields on multiple planets simultaneously. "Divert more synth-bio ships to the Andromeda sector," she ordered, her voice strained. "We need to reinforce the tectonic plates on Proxima 3 before the entire continent splits apart." Nova worked alongside her, weaving intricate plasma barriers to contain the still expanding void at the edge of known space. The multicolored energy fields pulsed and shifted, a delicate web holding back the encroaching nothingness. Lyra's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as she interfaced directly with the salvaged Worldwalker components, establishing a galaxy-wide communication network. Her voice echoed strangely as she relayed information from distant worlds. New ecosystem forming on Terrace Prime, she reported. The partially terraformed environment is evolving rapidly, indigenous species adapting at an unprecedented rate. Zorkath's scales rippled with concern as it studied the incoming data. Fascinating, but we must prioritize. Focus on the worlds facing immediate destruction. As the Alliance grappled with the cascading crises, Patrick limped into the command center. Supported by Dr. Vega, the room fell silent for a moment, all eyes turning to the man who had saved them from the Worldwalkers. Status report, Patrick demanded, his voice stronger than he felt. Aurora's telepathic voice filled his mind, bringing him up to speed on the situation. As she detailed the widespread devastation and the diplomatic tensions arising from the redistribution of habitable worlds, Patrick's face grew grim. We need to convene an emergency summit, he said, addressing the room. Representatives from all affected species. We can't afford to let this devolve into interstellar conflict. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. A technician's panicked voice cut through the chaos. Multiple Worldwalkers showing signs of reactivation. Their programming is overriding the failsafe. Patrick's heart sank. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, and now it seemed their victory might be short-lived. Zorthal stepped forward, its crystalline form pulsing with energy. I may have a solution, it said, its voice resonating with urgency. We can modify the Eternal Guardian to transmit a continuous suppression signal. But to do so, we must return to XR-27 and access the core of the ancient facility. Patrick nodded, his mind already racing with the implications. Assemble a team, he ordered. We'll need to navigate the transformed landscape. Nova, your plasma control will be essential. Ilara, your connection to Gaia might help us communicate with the evolved ecosystem. As preparations for the expedition began, a new alert sounded. Long-range sensors had detected a massive, unidentified object approaching the outer edges of the affected zone. It moved with purpose, seemingly unaffected by the void or the lingering effects of the Worldwalkers. Patrick stared at the holographic representation of the object, a chill running down his spine. They were already stretched to their limits, and now this new threat loomed on the horizon. We have no choice, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility. We must modify the Eternal Guardian before it's too late. The rest of the Alliance will have to prepare for whatever that object might be. As Patrick and his team geared up for their perilous journey into the heart of XR-27's transformed ecosystem, the command center erupted into a flurry of activity. Ships were dispatched, diplomatic channels opened, and defenses prepared. The expedition team stood before the shimmering portal that would transport them to XR-27. The once familiar planet now promised unknown dangers, its landscape warped by the merging of crystal amplifiers and rapidly evolving vegetation. Nova's hands crackled with plasma energy as she performed one final check of her equipment. Ready when you are, Patrick, she said, her voice tense but determined. Ilara closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind to sense the distant consciousness of Gaia. The planet's aware of our coming, she murmured. It's anticipating us. Patrick took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. With a nod to his team, he stepped forward into the portal. The fate of countless worlds hung in the balance as they ventured into the unknown, racing against time to secure the future of the galaxy. As they stepped through the shimmering portal, the familiar landscape of XR-27 dissolved into a surreal, alien world. The team emerged into a dense forest of energy-infused vegetation, crystalline structures jutting out at impossible angles. Bioluminescent vines pulsed with an otherworldly glow, casting eerie shadows across the transformed terrain. The air itself seemed to crackle with residual energy from the Worldwalkers' terraforming attempts. Nova raised her hands, plasma energy crackling between her fingertips. This is unlike anything I've ever seen, she muttered, her eyes wide as she took in the bizarre scenery. Patrick nodded grimly. Stay alert. We don't know what kind of dangers this new ecosystem might hold. As they pressed forward, the vegetation seemed to react to their presence, shifting and undulating in unnatural ways. Nova used her plasma control to clear paths through the densest growth, her energy beams slicing through the resilient plant matter with precision. Ilara walked with her eyes half closed, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I can feel Gaia's presence," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's different, evolved. The planet's consciousness is trying to communicate, but it's like trying to understand a language that's constantly changing." Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Patrick signaled for the team to halt, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The crystalline structures around them vibrated, emitting a high-pitched hum that set their teeth on edge. "Something's coming," Nova warned, her hands glowing with barely suppressed plasma energy. From the shifting undergrowth emerged a group of creatures unlike anything they had ever encountered. They appeared to be Evolvons, but far more advanced than any they had seen before. Their bodies were a seamless blend of organic matter and crystalline growths, pulsing with the same energy that permeated the forest. One of the creatures stepped forward, its multifaceted eyes focusing on Patrick. To everyone's surprise, it spoke, its voice a haunting melody of clicks and whispers. "We have been waiting for you, Patrick of Earth," it said, the words forming in their minds rather than their ears. "We are what the evil Vons have become, shaped by the energies of this world and the WorldNet Walker's terraform." Patrick lowered his weapon slowly, his mind racing. "You can help us?" The evolved Evelvon inclined its head in a gesture that might have been a nod. "We can guide you through this transformed land to the heart of the ancient facility you seek. But be warned, the way is treacherous and time is not on your side." As if to emphasize the creature's words, a distant rumble shook the forest. The team's communicators crackled to life, Aurora's voice cutting through static. "Patrick, we have a situation," she said, her tone urgent. "The void is expanding again. Nova's plasma barriers are failing, and we've detected a massive object entering the affected zone." Patrick exchanged a worried glance with his team. "We need to move fast," he said to the evolved Evelvon. "Can you take us to the facility now?" The creature's body shimmered, its crystalline components refracting light in complex patterns. "Follow us," it said, turning to lead them deeper into the transformed wilderness. As they traversed the ever-changing landscape, guided by the evolved Evolvons, Patrick's mind raced with the implications of their discovery. These creatures, born from the chaos of the Worldwalker's actions, might hold the key to understanding and controlling the vast energies at play. The journey was arduous, with the team navigating through corridors of shifting vegetation and over bridges of living crystal. Nova's plasma control proved invaluable, clearing obstacles and providing light in the darkest recesses of the transformed ecosystem. Ilara walked with her eyes closed, one hand outstretched, occasionally murmuring directions or warnings based on her tenuous connection with Gaia's evolving consciousness. "The planet is changing rapidly," she said at one point, her voice strained. "It's like watching millions of years of evolution compressed into moments." As they neared the heart of the ancient facility, the evolved Evelvons began to move with increasing urgency. "We sense a great disturbance," their leader communicated. "The old machines are stirring." Patrick's communicator crackled again, this time with Sorkath's voice. "Patrick, the unidentified object has revealed itself. It's a massive space station, and it's emitting some kind of energy field. Some planets are stabilizing, but others are becoming more volatile. Celeste is doing what she can, but we're stretched to our limits." Before Patrick could respond, they emerged into a vast chamber. At its center stood a structure that defied description, a fusion of ancient technology and living matter, pulsing with energy that made the air itself shimmer. "The core," the evolved Evelvon leader said. "Here, the heart of the Eternal Guardian beats in rhythm with the planet itself." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as she interfaced with the hybrid system. "It's incredible," she breathed. "The technology, the organic components, they're in perfect symbiosis." As Lyra began the delicate process of modifying the Eternal Guardian systems, Patrick's communicator came to life once more. This time, it was Dr. Vega's excited voice that filled the air. "Patrick, we've made a breakthrough with the captured Evasion," the scientist said. "The void, it's not what we thought. It's some kind of ancient transportation network linked to the World Walkers and the Eternal Guardian." Patrick's mind reeled with the implications. "Lyra," he called out, "we need to change our approach. Instead of suppressing the World Walkers, we need to control them, and possibly the void itself." Lyra nodded, her fingers dancing over the organic technological interface. "I think I can do it," she said, her voice strained with concentration, "but it's going to take time." Suddenly, the chamber shook violently. The evolved Evolvons chittered in alarm, their crystalline bodies resonating with a frequency that set everyone's teeth on edge. "The World Walkers," their leader communicated urgently. "They're reactivating across the galaxy." Patrick's heart raced as he realized the full scope of the crisis they faced. The reactivating World Walkers, the expanding void, the mysterious space station, everything was coming to a head, and they were at the center of it all. "Lyra, how much longer?" he asked, his voice tense. "I need more time," she replied, her hands moving faster over the interface. "This system is incredibly complex. One wrong move and we could lose everything." As if in response to her words, a new presence filled the chamber. A holographic projection flickered to life, revealing a being of impossible complexity. Part machine, part energy, part something entirely alien. "I am the custodian," it announced, its voice resonating through their very bones. "I have come to assess the situation and determine the fate of this galaxy." Patrick stepped forward, acutely aware that the next few moments could determine the future of countless civilizations. The custodian's arrival had triggered a cascade of events that threatened to spiral out of control. With the World Walkers reactivating, the void expanding, and Lyra racing against time to implement their desperate plan, the stage was set for a confrontation that would reshape the very fabric of space itself. "We need more time," Patrick said, addressing the custodian directly. "Whatever you're here to do, whatever your purpose is, you need to understand what's at stake. We're on the verge of either saving this galaxy or watching it tear itself apart." The custodian's form shimmered, its unfathomable gaze fixed on Patrick. "Time," it said, its voice echoing strangely, "is a luxury we may no longer have." "Have," the custodian intoned, its form fluctuating. "But the stakes are clear. Your actions here will determine the fate of this galaxy." As if to underscore the custodian's words, the chamber shuddered violently. Patrick's communicator erupted with a cacophony of urgent messages from across the affected zone. "The World Walkers," Zorkath's voice cut through the noise. "They're reactivating across the galaxy." Patrick's mind raced, processing the flood of information. "Lyra? Status update?" Lyra's fingers danced across the organic, technological interface, her face a mask of concentration. "I'm making progress, but this system is incredibly complex. The merger of Gaia's consciousness with the facility's AI is resisting some of my modifications." Ilara stepped forward, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "I can help," she said, placing her hand on the pulsing core. "Gaia, we mean you no harm. We seek to restore balance, not destroy what you've become." As Ilara communicated with the planet's evolved consciousness, Patrick turned his attention to the custodian. "We need your cooperation. Whatever your purpose here, surely it doesn't involve the destruction of countless worlds?" The custodian's form shimmered, its unfathomable gaze fixed on Patrick. "Our purpose is beyond your comprehension, but not incompatible with your goals. Proceed with your plan. We will observe." With a gesture, the custodian's projection expanded, filling the chamber with a holographic representation of the affected zone. Patrick watched in awe as the reactivating World Walkers began their terraforming processes anew, causing widespread chaos on countless worlds. "Celeste," Patrick called into his communicator. "Status report?" Celeste's strained voice came through, punctuated by the sounds of straining machinery. I'm pushing my abilities to the limit, Patrick. I've stabilized the worst of the planetary disruptions, but I can't hold out forever. As Patrick coordinated with his team across the galaxy, Lyra worked feverishly at the Eternal Guardian's core. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she navigated the intricate web of organic and technological systems. I think I've got it, Lyra announced, her voice tight with concentration. Alara, I need you to guide me through the final connections. We need to integrate the Evolvon's adaptive properties into the superweapons programming. Alara nodded, her eyes still closed as she communed with Gaia. I understand. The planet agrees. It sees the necessity of our actions. As Lyra and Alara worked in tandem, Patrick's attention was drawn to a new development on the custodian's holographic display. A massive space station had moved into a central position within the affected zone, emitting a complex energy field that interacted with the world walkers, the void, and the transformed ecosystems. Nova, Patrick called out. Are you seeing this? Nova's voice crackled through the communicator, filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. I see it, Patrick. That energy field, it's like nothing we've ever encountered. It's accelerating evolutionary processes, altering space-time itself in localized areas. Patrick watched as Nova led a team to the edge of the expanding void, her plasma control abilities creating a conduit for the custodian's energy. The void's expansion slowed, but didn't stop entirely. It's working, Patrick, Nova reported, her voice strained. But it's not enough. We need more power. As Patrick processed this information, a new structure began to form, extending from the planet's surface toward the custodian space station. It grew rapidly, a crystalline formation bridging the gap between XR-27 and the enigmatic vessel above. Taderner, team, Patrick announced, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. We need to investigate that structure. It could be the key to understanding the custodian's true purpose. As Patrick led a small group toward the crystalline formation, Lyra called out from the Eternal Guardian's core. Patrick, I've done it. The super weapon is now integrated with the Evolvon's adaptive properties. We have control over the World Walkers and the Void Network. Patrick allowed himself a moment of relief before focusing on the task at hand. Excellent work, Lyra. Maintain our position here. The rest of you, with me. We're going to uncover the truth behind all of this. The team cautiously approached the base of the crystalline structure. As they drew closer, Patrick could see that it was not a single, solid formation, but a complex lattice of interwoven crystal strands. Each strand pulsed with energy, creating a mesmerizing display of light and color. Careful, Patrick warned as they began their ascent. We don't know what kind of defenses this thing might have. As they climbed, the structure seemed to respond to their presence. Crystal formations shifted, creating pathways and platforms that guided their journey upward. The higher they climbed, the more Patrick sensed that they were being led somewhere specific. Suddenly, the crystal before them parted, revealing a vast chamber filled with advanced technology and pulsing data streams. At the center stood a figure unlike anything Patrick had ever seen, a being of pure energy, its form constantly shifting and reforming. Welcome, Patrick of Earth, the being spoke, its voice resonating through the crystal chamber. We are the custodian, the preserved consciousness of those you call the ancients. We have much to discuss about the future of this galaxy. Patrick stepped forward, acutely aware that he stood on the precipice of a moment that would shape the destiny of countless worlds. The true nature of the custodian, the purpose of the world walkers, and the future of the cosmos itself hung in the balance. As he prepared to engage in this historic dialogue, Patrick knew that every word, every decision, would echo across the stars for generations to come. Come. As Patrick opened his mouth to respond, a violent tremor shook the crystal chamber, nearly knocking him off his feet. What's happening? He shouted, steadying himself against a nearby console. The custodian's energy form flickered, its voice tinged with urgency. The connection is destabilizing. The integration of our systems was more volatile than anticipated. Patrick's communicator crackled to life, Celeste's voice cutting through the din. Patrick, the crystal structure is collapsing. We need to evacuate immediately. Without hesitation, Patrick turned to his team. Everyone out, now, move! They raced through the labyrinthine crystal passages, the structure groaning and shifting around them. Shards of crystal rained down, forcing them to duck and weave as they made their descent. Patrick coordinated the evacuation, ensuring every member of the diplomatic team and research staff made it to safety. As they reached the base of the structure, Patrick watched in awe as Celeste manipulated gravity fields to hold crumbling sections in place. Her face was a mask of concentration, sweat beading on her forehead as she strained against the collapsing crystal. "I can't hold it much longer," Celeste called out, her voice strained. The last group sprinted past them, and Patrick nodded to Celeste. "Let it go!" As Celeste released her hold, a massive surge of energy pulsed through the structure. The crystal formation shattered, severing the connection between XR-27 and the custodian station. The shockwave knocked them off their feet, sending them sprawling across the planet's surface. Patrick struggled to his feet, ears ringing from the explosion. "Status report," he barked into his communicator. Lyra's panicked voice responded. "Patrick, we have a problem. The energy surge triggered a chain reaction in the Eternal Guardian. The power buildup is off the charts." Patrick's mind raced. "Can you contain it?" "I'm trying," Lyra replied, her voice tight with concentration. "But the strain on my technopathic abilities is intense. I don't know how long I can hold it." "Nova," Patrick called out, "take a team to the super weapons core. Use your plasma control to create a buffer zone. We need to buy Lyra more time." As Nova's team rushed to assist, Patrick watched in amazement as the Evilvons responded to the crisis. Their crystalline bodies resonated with the planet's energy, forming living conduits that began to disperse the excess power throughout XR-27's ecosystem. A new alert blared from Patrick's communicator. Zorkath's voice came through, filled with urgency. "Patrick, the Worldwalkers are realigning. They're forming some kind of massive geometric pattern across multiple star systems." Patrick's eyes widened as he processed the implications. "The gravitational disturbances, they're tearing planets apart," Zorkath confirmed grimly. "Celeste," Patrick called out, "coordinate with the synth-bio collective. We need a network of gravity anchors to stabilize the vulnerable worlds." As Celeste set to work, Patrick's attention was drawn to the void at the edge of the affected zone. The cosmic anomaly was reacting to the Worldwalkers' realignment, expanding and contracting chaotically. "Sir," a nearby officer reported, "we're detecting spontaneous wormhole formation. The void is creating pathways across the galaxy." Patrick's eyes sharp. "Alert all Alliance ships. We need to secure those wormholes before hostile forces can exploit them." As chaos unfolded across the galaxy, Patrick's communicator lit up with a transmission from the custodian station. The ancient AI's voice filled the air, its tone grave. "Patrick of Earth, what you are witnessing is a long-dormant reactivation sequence. Our civilization's grand design is attempting to complete itself, but the consequences for your galaxy may be catastrophic." Patrick's mind raced, piecing together everything they had learned. The Worldwalkers, the Void, the Evilvons. It was all part of a single vast system, and now that system was awakening, blind to the destruction it was causing. A plan began to form in Patrick's mind, daring and potentially suicidal. He turned to his team, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We need to take control of the entire ancient system," he announced. "Use the Eternal Guardian in conjunction with the Evilvons' adaptive abilities to guide the reactivation process. It's the only way to minimize the damage to existing civilizations." Lyra's eyes widened as she realized the implications. "Patrick, to do that, you'd need to physically connect with the superweapons core. The strain on your mind would be enormous, I know," Patrick finished, "but it's a risk we have to take. Millions of lives are at stake." As his team prepared for the dangerous procedure, a new alert sounded. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet entering the affected zone. Its ships a bizarre hybrid of Worldwalker and Evolvon technology. A transmission cut through their communications, a voice both familiar and alien. "This is the synthesized arbiter of the Equilibrium Directive. We claim dominion over these ancient systems. Surrender control or face annihilation. Patrick's expression hardened as he realized the true scale of the conflict they now faced. With a nod to his team, he strode towards the chamber housing the Eternal Guardian's core. Lyra, establish a technopathic link. Monitor my vital signs, he ordered. Nova, stand ready with your plasma abilities. If anything goes wrong, don't hesitate to pull me out. As Patrick approached the pulsing core of the ancient superweapon, he took a deep breath. The fate of countless civilizations hung in the balance. With unwavering dedication, he reached out and placed his hands on the organic technological interface, feeling the surge of power course through his body as his mind connected with the vast, ancient network. The universe seemed to expand within Patrick's consciousness, a web of energy and information stretching across the cosmos. He could sense the world walkers, the void, the evolvons, all interconnected, all part of a grand design beyond human comprehension. As he struggled to assert control over the awakening systems, Patrick knew that the next few moments would determine the future of the galaxy itself. As Patrick's hands made contact with the organic technological interface of the Eternal Guardian's core, a brilliant surge of energy coursed through his body. The chamber erupted in a blinding light, forcing Nova and Lyra to shield their eyes. Patrick's consciousness expanded rapidly, merging with the vast network of ancient systems spanning the galaxy. In an instant, Patrick's mind connected with the World Walkers, the Void Network, and the Evolvons. The grand design of the forgotten civilization unfolded before him, revealing both its immense potential and its inherent flaws. With this newfound understanding, Patrick began to reshape the reactivation sequence, guiding it towards a more harmonious integration with existing galactic civilizations. Outside the chamber, chaos erupted as the synthesized Arbiter's fleet engaged the Alliance forces. Nova's voice crackled through the communication channels. Engaging enemy fighters. Their hybrid technology is unlike anything we've seen before. Plasma streaked across space as Nova led her squadron, creating shields and weapons from the ionized gas to counter the advanced Equilibrium Directive ships. The void pulsed with energy as wormholes spontaneously formed and collapsed, adding to the already chaotic battlefield. Celeste's steady voice cut through the din. Gravity anchors in place, initiating countermeasures against enemy formations. The battlefield shifted as Celeste manipulated gravity fields, disrupting the Arbiter's fleet and providing cover for Allied vessels. Ships tumbled through space, their trajectories altered by invisible forces. Within the Eternal Guardian's core, Patrick's expanded consciousness reached out to the Evolvons integrated into the Equilibrium Directive ships. He awakened their innate ability to adapt and evolve, causing a cascade of changes throughout the enemy fleet. Sir, an officer reported, enemy ships are malfunctioning. Entire sections of their fleet are going dark. The custodian's energy form flickered into view beside Patrick. You have succeeded where we could not, it intoned. We choose to relinquish our control and integrate our knowledge into this new galactic network. As the custodian's vast repository of information flowed into the system, Patrick gained even greater precision in fine-tuning the reactivation process. Lyra, maintaining her technopathic link with Patrick, broadcast his consciousness across the Alliance communication channels. Patrick's voice resonated through every ship and station in the Allied fleet. This is Patrick. I'm coordinating our efforts with the realigning World Walkers and stabilizing Void Network. Follow my guidance to navigate the changing cosmic landscape. The Alliance fleet moved in perfect harmony, weaving through the battlefield with unparalleled efficiency. World Walkers across the galaxy began to align, forming stable connections between habitable worlds. On XR-27's surface, Alora's eyes snapped open, her connection with Gaia intensifying. Patrick, she called out, the synthesized Arbiter is making a final push towards the planet. Patrick's expanded consciousness confirmed Alora's warning. Without hesitation, he activated XR-27's fully evolved defensive capabilities. The planet's surface shimmered as countless crystalline drones emerged, swarming towards the approaching Arbiter's ship. The drones surrounded the massive vessel, neutralizing its weapon systems with precision strikes. The synthesized arbiter's voice boomed across all frequencies. This is not the end. The Equilibrium Directive will. The transmission cut off abruptly as the crystalline swarm overwhelmed the ship's communication array. With the immediate threat contained, Patrick initiated the final stage of the reactivation sequence. Across the galaxy, worldwalkers snapped into perfect alignment, creating a stable network of inhabitable worlds connected by controlled wormholes. The chaotic void receded, transforming into navigable corridors of space-time linking distant star systems. As the new galactic order took shape, Patrick felt the strain of maintaining control over such vast systems. His consciousness began to fragment, threatening to disperse across the network. In a final act of will, he imprinted his core values and directives into the system, ensuring it would prioritize cooperation, growth, and the preservation of diverse life forms. Nova, Lyra, Patrick's thoughts echoed weakly through the technopathic link. I can't... Hold on. Recognizing the danger, Nova and Lyra combined their abilities, creating a conduit for Patrick's consciousness to return to his body. Energy crackled between them as they fought to contain Patrick's expanded mind. Stay with us, Patrick, Lyra urged, her face contorted with effort. Follow our link back. Nova's plasma abilities formed a protective cocoon around Patrick's physical form, guiding his fractured consciousness home. As Patrick's mind reconnected with his body, the chamber's energy signature stabilized, and the blinding light subsided. Patrick's eyes fluttered open, his gaze unfocused. He found himself surrounded by the Everin girls, their faces etched with concern and relief. Nova helped him to his feet as Lyra ran a quick diagnostic on his vital signs. Did it work? Patrick asked, his voice hoarse. Before anyone could answer, a series of transmissions flooded their communication channels. Alliance leaders from across the galaxy reported on the unprecedented changes they were witnessing. New worlds had become accessible, wormholes stabilized, and the threat of the Equilibrium Directive had been neutralized. As the implications of their success began to sink in, Patrick looked at each of the Everin girls in turn. These once abandoned aliens, now powerful beings integral to the reshaping of the galaxy, gathered around him in a protective circle. We did it, Patrick said, a mix of awe and exhaustion in his voice. But our work is a long way to go. The galaxy as we knew it has changed forever, and we need to help guide it into this new era. The chamber's doors slid open, revealing a group of Alliance leaders eager to discuss the path forward. As Patrick prepared to face the challenges ahead, he drew strength from the presence of his adopted daughters. Together, they stepped forward to shape the destiny of their transformed galaxy.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.